Welcome, weary traveller of time, to a sanctuary woven from shadows and frost. Close your eyes, and let the burdens of your waking hours melt away, replaced by the deep, rhythmic stillness of a world long past. We are journeying to the heart of winter in the year 1860, to the grand, sleeping expanse of the Hudson River Valley. Here the biting winds have settled into a soft, breathless hush, and the world is wrapped in a thick, glittering blanket of pristine white snow. Breathe in deeply. Taste the sharp, pure essence of pine and crystallized air, a scent so clean it clears the mind of all modern clutter. Imagine yourself wrapped in layers of heavy, comforting wool, feeling the gentle, rhythmic crunch of untouched snow beneath your leather boots. You are perfectly safe here, cocooned within the quiet majesty of a frozen midnight. The sky above is a canvas of the deepest indigo, scattered with a million diamond-bright stars that seem to hum a silent, ancient lullaby. Far below, the river has transformed into a great ribbon of solid sapphire ice resting under the watchful gaze of the surrounding, slumbering mountains. Let your tired muscles grow heavy, let your thoughts drift like a solitary snowflake caught in a slow, winding updraft. Now we are about to cross the threshold into a forgotten night, where the only sounds are the whispers of nature and the steady, reassuring heartbeat of a forgotten era. Rest now, relax, and listen. As we stand here upon the snowy crest overlooking the vast, gleaming theatre of the ice harvest, take a moment to anchor yourself in this shared, peaceful journey. If you find comfort in these quiet wanderings through the corridors of time, if the gentle echoes of history offer a balm to your weary spirit, consider leaving a small mark upon our path. You might gently press the button to subscribe, allowing us to return together night after night to these sanctuaries of slumbering centuries. Liking this tale is akin to lighting a warm, flickering lantern in the dark, guiding other restless souls toward this haven of tranquility. It is a quiet gesture, softer than the owl's wing brushing the pine branches above us, yet it sustains the embers of our storytelling fire. Now, let the modern world fade completely into the mist behind us. The lantern light down on the frozen river beckons, casting long, wavering shadows across the thick, translucent blocks of ice that have been carved from the water's frozen surface. The distant clinking of metal tools against the hardened frost sounds like a sequence of muted, silver chimes carried on the breeze. We are stepping down the gentle slope now, leaving our footprints in the silvered snow, ready to immerse ourselves entirely in the meticulous, hypnotic rhythm of a midnight harvest. Settle much deeper into your soft pillows, let your breath align with the slow pulse of the winter night, and let us slowly, peacefully wander onward. Let us begin our slow, deliberate descent toward the magnificent frozen artery of the valley. The path winding down the hillside is less a road and more a gentle crease in the snowy landscape, undisturbed save for the shallow rhythmic indentations we leave behind. The snow here is not merely white. Under the celestial glow it takes on a complex tapestry of muted colours. It is a canvas painted with strokes of pale lavender, soft periwinkle, and the deepest, most melancholic shades of indigo where the shadows of towering hemlocks fall. As you step, the crushed crystals emit a sound so dry, so finely tuned it resembles the rustle of heavy silk sliding across a polished wooden floor. This is a dry cold, a preserving cold, the kind that holds the world in a state of suspended animation. The air you draw into your lungs is bracingly pure, carrying the faint, woody aroma of dormant oak and the sharp, metallic tang of ozone that always precedes a deeper freeze. Look closely at the branches of the birch trees flanking our descent. Each slender twig is encased in a delicate sheath of rime ice. The moonlight catches these microscopic frost needles, turning the entire grove into a slumbering forest of spun glass. There is no wind to rattle them. They simply exist in a state of brittle, beautiful perfection. The stillness is absolute, a heavy, comforting blanket that wraps around your shoulders, urging your heart rate to slow, matching the lethargic pulse of the sleeping earth beneath the permafrost. Emerging from the edge of the tree line, the grand theatre of the Hudson River reveals itself in all its formidable glory. At this hour, under the dome of a cloudless midnight sky, it does not look like a river at all, but rather an endless polished plateau of dark marble. The sheer scale of the ice sheet is staggering, stretching out across the valley floor until it dissolves into the hazy atmospheric perspective of the distant rolling foothills. Step onto the surface. Notice how it feels beneath your soles, an unyielding monumental solidity that belies the flowing current trapped deep beneath. The frozen expanse is not a uniform sheet, but a rich geological text written in water and cold. In some places it is a profound inky black, a mirror reflecting the glittering constellations above with such perfect clarity that it feels as though you are walking across the night sky itself. In other areas where the freezing process trapped millions of microscopic air pockets, the surface turns a milky opalescent white, resembling veins of raw quartz embedded in dark stone. Lean down and peer into the crystalline depths. You can see bubbles of oxygen suspended within the frozen matrix, some as tiny as pearls, others forming flat silver discs layered one upon another like coins resting at the bottom of a wishing well. Occasionally, a deep, resonant groan echoes from miles away, the song of the shifting frost. It is a low, vibrating hum, a sound born of immense pressure and fluctuating temperatures, resonating through the valley like the lowest note of a cathedral organ. It is not a sound of danger, but merely the waterway shifting comfortably in its winter bed, a reminder of the massive natural forces gently cradling us in this quiet moment. Scattered across this vast, dark mirror are tiny islands of amber warmth. The harvesters have left a skeleton crew to tend the channels, and their presence is marked by the soft, wavering glow of pierced tin lanterns. These lanterns do not conquer the darkness, rather they politely negotiate with it, casting pools of golden light that shimmer and dance across the slick, freshly cleared surfaces. The glass panes of the fixtures are etched with delicate ferns of frost, softening the illumination into a fuzzy, welcoming halo. It is the color of old honey, a rich, soothing tone that provides a perfect counterpoint to the relentless blues and silvers of the moonlit landscape. Look upward past the warm beacons to the source of the silver light. The moon tonight is a brilliant, heavy sphere of platinum, hanging low enough to feel like a quiet companion rather than a distant celestial body. It is surrounded by a faint prismatic halo, a moondog, created by the moonlight refracting through millions of invisible ice crystals suspended in the upper atmosphere. This ghostly ring paints the sky with the faintest hints of spectral red and pale blue, a phenomenon that feels both ancient and deeply magical. The starlight is equally hypnotic. Without the glare of modern civilization, the Milky Way stretches across the firmament like a river of diamond dust, echoing the frozen channel below. The connection between the sky and the earth feels tangible here, as if the falling snow was merely the stars themselves, drifting down to rest upon the valley floor. Everything is bathed in a serene, monochromatic elegance, inviting your mind to let go of its daily worries and simply drift within this vast, beautiful emptiness. Following the path of golden lantern light toward the eastern shore, the silhouette of a truly monumental structure begins to detach itself from the shadows of the shoreline. This is the great icehouse, the silent vault where the winter's bounty will be stored, guarded against the inevitable return of the summer sun. It is a marvel of rustic, utilitarian architecture, looming like a benevolent, windowless fortress at the water's edge. The structure is impossibly long, its roofline a straight, dark stroke against the starry backdrop, crowned with small, slatted cupolas designed to allow the warm air to escape. As we draw nearer, the colossal scale of the building becomes apparent, its sheer walls rising high into the night. It is constructed from massive timbers of old-growth pine, the wood aged to a deep, weathered silver by years of driving snow and summer rain. The rough-hewn planks are fastened with heavy, hand-forged iron square nails, the metal blooming with a dark velvety patina of rust. Run a gloved hand along the exterior wall. You can feel the deep grooves and ridges of the wood grain, a tactile map of the tree's long life before it was felled to serve this monumental purpose. The architecture relies on the brilliant, simple science of isolation. These walls are ingeniously double-layered, creating a cavernous void between the outer skin and the inner sanctum. This empty space is meticulously packed with tons of sawdust and dried marsh hay, a thick, breathable blanket of insulation that will preserve the harvest deep into the humid months of August. Extending from the towering facade of the building, angling down toward the river like the long wooden ramps of an ancient citadel, are the heavy timber chutes. These tracks, worn smooth by the friction of countless frozen blocks, await the dawn's labor. Tonight they rest in perfect stillness. The scent lingering near the base of the structure is a complex grounding perfume. It is the mingling of the raw, resinous odor of the pine beams, the dusty, sweet aroma of the insulating sawdust drifting from the wall cavities, and the overriding metallic crispness of the winter air. If you were to press your fingers into the small cracks between the exterior boards, you would feel the soft, powdery give of the packed sawdust. It is remarkably dry, retaining the faint, ghostly warmth of the sawmill where it was created, offering a subtle, earthy contrast to the biting frost outside. It smells of preservation, of patience, and of quiet, honest labor suspended in time. Even the shadows cast by the broad eaves seem softer here, providing a velvety, dark sanctuary against the reflective glare of the open field. As you stand here, caught between the vast frozen expanse and the silent wooden fortress, allow the profound stillness to permeate your bones. The world has stopped its frantic spinning. There is only the frost, the stars, the comforting scent of weathered pine, and the deep, restful quiet of the long winter night. Let us turn away from the vast gleaming mirror of the frozen river and approach the towering, windowless facade of the great icehouse. Moving closer to this monumental structure, the sheer weight and presence of the building become a deeply comforting anchor in the endless expanse of winter. Wrought into the center of the broad pine-planked wall is a singular, massive set of double doors, designed not for the passage of men, but for the grand rhythmic intake of heavy crystalline blocks. To the side, a smaller, more intimate door waits, recessed slightly into the thick double-layered wall. Approach this smaller entrance. The latch is a heavy, hand-forged piece of black iron, deeply pitted and textured like the surface of a dark, cooling meteorite. When you press your thumb against the broad, flat thumbpiece, the metal feels profoundly cold, yet remarkably smooth, polished to a dull, charcoal sheen by the friction of countless heavy leather mittens. As you slowly press inward, the heavy wooden door opens with a long, drawn-out baritone groan. It is not a harsh sound, but rather the deep, sleepy voice of old timber shifting on its hinges, akin to the timber framing of a great sailing ship gently settling into a calm, protective harbor. Stepping over the raised wooden threshold, you cross the boundary from the boundless, starlit world into a deeply secluded, cavernous sanctuary. As the thick wooden door gently closes behind you, shutting with a soft, definitive thud, the sharp, biting edge of the midnight wind is entirely severed, leaving you enveloped in a profound, heavy stillness. The atmosphere within this inner sanctum is a dramatic, soothing departure from the crystalline sharpness of the river. The air here is completely motionless, holding a different, milder quality of cold, a dry, insulated chill that feels almost protective. Instantly, your senses are wrapped in an incredibly rich, earthy tapestry of scents. The dominating fragrance is that of ancient, seasoned pine resin, a deeply grounding aroma that radiates from the massive, rough-hewn pillars and crossbeams supporting the roof. Interwoven with this woody perfume is the dusty, sweet scent of countless tons of packed sawdust hidden within the walls, and the faint, nostalgic aroma of dried marsh hay, a smell that subtly whispers of forgotten sun-drenched summer afternoons. As your eyes slowly adjust to the enveloping darkness, the architecture of the space reveals itself in the soft, ethereal light filtering down from the slatted ventilation cupolas high above. Beams of pale silver moonlight slice through the shadowy vastness like gentle glowing pillars supporting the darkness. Within these shafts of lunar light, millions of microscopic dust motes perform a slow, hypnotic waltz, drifting and spiraling in a state of perpetual, weightless suspension. The sheer scale of the interior mimics the quiet, hollowed awe of an empty cathedral, the high, vaulted ceiling losing itself in a canopy of intersecting shadows and colossal wooden rafters. Lower your gaze to the floor beneath your boots, for it is not made of earth, stone, or even bare wood. The entire foundation of this enormous room is carpeted in a thick, meticulously laid bed of insulating dunnage. It is a deep, yielding mattress composed of coarse wood shavings, fragrant sawdust, and long, pale strands of dried river grass. Take a slow, deliberate step. The sensation beneath your feet is remarkably soft and cushioning, absorbing the weight of your stride with a gentle, muffled sigh. The deep layer of organic material acts as a perfect acoustic dampener, swallowing all echoes and turning the vast empty hall into a chamber of absolute velvety silence. Every breath you take sounds intimate and close. Every rustle of your heavy wool coat is softened into a faint, comforting whisper. If you were to kneel and run your bare hands through this insulating blanket, you would feel the fascinating variety of textures. The sawdust is fine and slightly powdery, retaining a ghost of the warmth from the friction of the mill's blade. The wood shavings curl into delicate, brittle ribbons, while the strands of marsh grass are long, smooth, and paper-thin, carrying the pale, washed-out hues of faded yellow and muted sage green. This deep bedding is patiently waiting to cradle the first massive blocks of ice, preparing to blanket them in a protective embrace that will ward off the creeping warmth of the approaching spring and summer. Over along the far eastern wall, bathed in the gentle perimeter of a stray moonbeam, rests a long, sturdy wooden rack. This is where the implements of the harvest sleep, a collection of specialized handcrafted tools resting in perfect, orderly silence. Approach the rack and observe these instruments of labor, now rendered entirely peaceful by the midnight hour. Foremost among them are the great ice saws, magnificent, intimidating objects that measure nearly 6 feet in length. The steel blades are thick and rigid, designed to plunge deep into the frozen river without bending. Run your eyes along the edge of the blade. The teeth are incredibly large, widely spaced, and aggressively angled, resembling the jagged dorsal ridge of some prehistoric silver leviathan. Yet, despite their formidable appearance, they rest now in total tranquility. To protect the precious steel from the dampness of the winter air, the blades have been meticulously rubbed down with a thin, glistening coat of linseed oil. The oil catches the moonlight, turning the cold, dark steel into a shimmering ribbon of liquid silver. Lean in close and you can detect the faint, nutty, slightly oxidized aroma of the linseed oil, a scent that mingles perfectly with the dry dust and ancient wood. The handles of these magnificent saws are shaped like the letter T, carved from dense, unyielding hickory wood. Look closely at the wooden crossbars. They are darkened and stained by the natural oils of the hands that have gripped them, polished to a glass-like smoothness that tells a silent, tactile story of rhythmic, swaying labor. Hanging from heavy wooden pegs driven deep into the timber walls just above the slumbering saws are the massive iron ice tongs. These are not delicate instruments, but rather robust skeletal mechanisms forged to grip and hoist tremendous weight. They resemble giant, heavy compasses or the dark iron mandibles of an enormous beetle. The wrought iron is thick, square-forged, and painted with a dull, matte black finish to ward off the rust. The pivot points are secured with thick, hand-hammered steel rivets, engineered to withstand immense strain. Attached to the upper rings of the tongs are heavy loops of thick, braided hemp rope, the fibers frayed and softened by use, creating a stark, textural contrast to the unyielding metal. Beside the tongs, leaning casually in the corner like weary sentinels, are a dozen long pike poles. The shafts are turned from straight-grained ash, a wood chosen specifically for its remarkable combination of flexibility and incredible strength. The wood is pale, almost white in the shadows, sanded perfectly smooth so as not to catch on heavy woolen mittens. At the very tip of each long pole is a sharp forged iron hook and a pointed spike, an elegant utilitarian design meant to grab, push, and steer the floating blocks of ice through the dark water channels. Standing here, surrounded by these silent resting tools, the sense of anticipation is profoundly peaceful. They are not artifacts of a frantic rush, but the patient instruments of a slow, deliberate, and deeply natural rhythm. They wait in the dark, breathing the scent of pine and linseed oil, completely at rest in this cathedral of wood and frost. Let us slowly retreat from the cavernous, pine-scented belly of the great icehouse, leaving the slumbering tools to their silent vigil. You press your hand against the thick, heavy wood of the small access door, feeling the cold transfer through your leather glove as you push it outward. The hinges release another long, drawn-out baritone sigh, and you step back over the raised threshold, emerging once more into the boundless, starlit theatre of the winter night. As the door closes behind you with a muffled, definitive thud, the acoustic deadness of the sawdust sanctuary is instantly replaced by the sharp, crystalline clarity of the open air. The temperature difference is immediate, a bracing, invigorating kiss of frost against your cheeks that awakens the senses without causing discomfort. You pull your heavy wool collar a little closer around your neck, burying your chin into the soft, scratchy warmth of the fabric. Your breath, which was invisible inside the insulated vault, now blossoms into thick, swirling plumes of silver vapor, hanging in the still air for a long moment before slowly dissolving into the midnight blue. We turn our gaze away from the frozen expanse of the river and walk along the shoreline, following a narrow, well-trodden path where the deep snow has been packed down into a smooth, icy ribbon by the heavy footfalls of men and beasts. The crunch of your boots is the only sound, a rhythmic, powdery squeak that seems to measure the slow, peaceful passing of the night. A short distance away, nestled against the protective windbreak of a dense grove of towering hemlocks, sits a long, low structure. This is the temporary shoreline stable, erected to shelter the magnificent draft horses that will power the harvest at the break of dawn. It is a sturdy, pragmatic shelter constructed from rough-sawn pine planks and covered with overlapping layers of heavy, waterproofed canvas. The canvas is drawn tight over the wooden frame, its surface painted a dull, weather-beaten grey that blends seamlessly into the surrounding shadows. As we draw nearer, a subtle, profound change occurs in the atmosphere. The sharp, metallic scent of the frozen river begins to recede, replaced by an incredibly rich, warm, and deeply comforting bouquet of aromas. It is the unmistakable earthy perfume of resting equines, a complex mingling of sweet, sun-dried Timothy hay, the rich molasses-tinged scent of crushed oats, and the dark, musky aroma of warm leather and animal heat. A single pierced tin lantern hangs from a heavy iron hook near the entrance, its candle casting a soft, flickering amber glow across the snow. The light from the lantern does not pierce the darkness, rather, it creates a cozy golden hemisphere of warmth, inviting us to step out of the biting frost and into the protective embrace of the shelter. The snow directly in front of the stable entrance is scattered with loose golden stalks of straw, looking like fragments of spun sunlight resting upon the frozen ground. Stepping under the heavy canvas awning and into the dim, rustling interior of the stable, the immediate sensation is one of enveloping, radiant warmth. Here, standing shoulder to shoulder in their wide, deeply bedded stalls, are 6 magnificent Percheron draft horses. These are not merely animals, they are gentle, living mountains of muscle and bone, bred for immense power and possessing a temperament of profound, unshakable calm. Their massive, broad backs rise high into the shadowy rafters, and their heavily muscled chests are as wide as the trunks of ancient oak trees. In the soft, wavering light of the lantern, their dapple-grey coats take on a magical, almost metallic quality. The darker spots of grey appear as deep charcoal shadows, while the lighter areas of their coats shimmer like brushed silver or tarnished pewter. They are resting now, standing in that quiet, semi-conscious state of equine slumber. The stable is filled with the deeply hypnotic, rhythmic sound of their breathing. It is a slow, oceanic sound, the deep drawing in of the cold air and the long, resonant, rumbling exhale. With every outward breath, twin jets of thick white steam billow from their velvet nostrils, rising lazily toward the canvas roof, like the smoke from a row of peaceful, dormant volcanoes. Occasionally, one of the massive beasts shifts its weight, resulting in the heavy, muffled thud of a steel-shod hoof against the thick layer of straw and packed earth. It is a sound of immense weight settling, a grounding, rhythmic percussion that echoes the slow heartbeat of the winter night. Move closer to the stall nearest the lantern light and observe the stunning micro-details of these slumbering giants. Notice the incredible density of the horse's winter coat. To survive the brutal sub-zero temperatures of the ice harvest, nature has provided them with a remarkably thick, double-layered pelt, The outer hairs are long, coarse, and incredibly resilient, designed to shed snow and freezing rain like a thatched roof. Beneath this tough exterior lies a dense, plush undercoat of fine, downy hair, crimped and tightly packed to trap the body's natural heat. If you were to slide your bare hand beneath that outer layer, you would find it astonishingly warm, radiating a deep, furnace-like heat that defies the freezing air just inches away. Focus your gaze on the horse's heavy, sculpted head, which droops heavily toward the wooden manger. Its large, dark eyes are half-closed, the long, thick eyelashes casting intricate, sweeping shadows across its cheek. When the eye occasionally opens, it is a deep, liquid pool of dark obsidian, reflecting a miniature, dancing replica of the lantern flame within its calm, unfathomable depths. The muzzle is a marvel of contrasting textures, while the jaw is armored with thick, coarse whiskers that look like frost-covered wire. The tip of the nose is covered in hair so fine and short it feels exactly like the softest, most expensive velvet. Few stray flakes of pale green hay dust cling to this velvety surface, a tiny poignant detail of their midnight meal. Resting on sturdy wooden racks along the back wall of the shelter, just behind the slumbering horses, is their heavy working gear. The harnesses hang in quiet anticipation, a complex, orderly puzzle of thick leather, iron, and brass. The scent of this equipment is intoxicating, a rich, dark blend of aged neatsfoot oil used to keep the leather supple in the freezing temperatures, mixed with the sharp tang of saddle soap and the lingering musk of the horses themselves. Look at the massive horse collars, heavily padded with tightly packed straw and encased in smooth, dark leather, designed to comfortably distribute the immense pulling force across the animal's powerful shoulders. The leather is polished to a dull, handsome sheen, scarred with deep, permanent creases that map the history of countless winter harvests. The thick, flat traces, the heavy lines that will connect the horses to the iron ice plows, are coiled neatly like sleeping black serpents. Here and there the soft lantern light catches the dull, tarnished gleam of a solid brass buckle or a heavy iron hame ring. There is a profound sense of partnership and quiet respect in the way this heavy gear is meticulously maintained and stored. It waits patiently in the shadows, just as the horses wait, just as the ice waits. Standing here in the warmth of the stable, enveloped by the smell of hay and the slow, rhythmic breathing of the gentle giants, you feel a deep, abiding sense of safety. The harshness of the winter has been entirely neutralized by the shared warmth of these magnificent creatures, leaving only a hypnotic, lingering peace as the night slowly stretches toward the unseen dawn. Leaving the radiant, hay-scented warmth of the canvas stable, we step back out into the boundless theatre of the slumbering Hudson Valley. The heavy, insulated door of the mind gently closes on the rhythmic breathing of the draft horses, and once again the magnificent, sharp clarity of the winter midnight washes over you. The transition is not an abrupt plunge, but rather a slow, refreshing awakening of the senses, a delicate wading back into the pristine, crystalline bath of the night air. The warmth of the stable lingers briefly on the heavy wool of your coat, slowly surrendering to the creeping, preserving frost. Notice how the sky seems to have deepened in its indigo hue during our brief respite indoors, the stars burning with a steady, unblinking intensity that speaks of ancient, immeasurable distances. The air here feels thinner, more refined, completely devoid of the rich, heavy musks of the shoreline shelter. We walk back down the gently sloping bank, our boots once again sinking into the dry, powdery snow, producing that soft, rhythmic, squeaking sound that serves as a reassuring metronome for our peaceful wanderings. With every step, the sound acts as a soothing anchor, grounding you in the present moment of this historical dreamscape. The moonlight acts as our silent guide, casting long, pale shadows that stretch like ghostly fingers across the silvered landscape. As we reach the very edge of the riverbank where the land surrenders to the frozen water, a new mesmerizing sight reveals itself upon the dark, polished surface of the ice. It is a testament to the quiet, meticulous labor that precedes the harvest, a vast, sweeping tapestry of geometric precision laid gently upon the chaotic beauty of nature. Stretching out across the expansive dark mirror of the river is an immense, perfectly ordered grid. It is as if a giant celestial architect has descended and etched a magnificent checkerboard into the very skin of the frozen world. These are the score marks, the shallow intersecting trenches carved into the ice to guide the heavy saws that will sing at dawn. At this hour, devoid of the men and beasts that created them, the lines possess a haunting, hypnotic beauty. Look down the length of one of these long, straight grooves. It extends outward, perfectly parallel to the distant shoreline, running for hundreds of yards before finally dissolving into the misty silver haze of the horizon. The sheer scale of the endeavor is staggering, transforming the wild, winding river into an endless quilt of perfect squares. Intersecting these longitudinal lines at exact 90-degree angles are the crosscuts, forming uniform blocks that measure roughly 22 inches on each side. The moonlight performs a captivating slow-motion dance within these shallow trenches, where the surface of the untouched ice is dark and reflective, resembling a floor of polished obsidian. The freshly scored grooves are filled with a fine, granular powder of shaved ice that catches the lunar light brilliantly. The grid glows with a soft bioluminescent quality, a vast glowing lattice of pale silver thread woven across the dark, heavy fabric of the sleeping river. Standing at the edge of this immense pattern, the mind is lulled by the sheer repetition, the endless, soothing geometry that imposes a sense of profound order and calm upon the wild, freezing night. Your eyes trace the lines back and forth, a visual pendulum that gently rocks your consciousness toward a state of deeper and deeper relaxation. Resting silently near the edge of this glowing grid, looking like a skeletal, forgotten chariot of winter, is the implement responsible for this grand design, the horse-drawn ice marker. Let us approach this solitary piece of machinery, a quiet monument to agricultural ingenuity standing alone in the starlight. It is constructed of heavy, dark oak and thick forged iron, possessing a sturdy utilitarian grace. The frame consists of a heavy wooden beam, worn smooth by the friction of thick, leather-palmed gloves over countless freezing nights. Trace your fingers gently along the grain of the oak. It is freezing to the touch, yet it retains a deep organic texture, the wood completely sealed and darkened by layers of protective, weather-resistant oils. Beneath the heavy wooden chassis are the runners, thick blades of iron that function much like the rails of a sled. But these are not meant merely for gliding gracefully over the snow. Look closely at the leading blade. It is deeply serrated, featuring a row of sharp, menacing teeth designed to bite firmly into the hardened surface of the river. Now at rest, the teeth are coated in a delicate, furry layer of white rime frost, softening their aggressive profile and rendering them entirely peaceful. Beside, the cutting blade is a secondary, smooth runner, positioned exactly 22 inches away. This is the guide, the brilliant, simple mechanism that traces the previously cut line, ensuring that every subsequent row is perfectly parallel to the last, creating the mesmerizing checkerboard pattern. The ironwork is a masterclass in 19th century blacksmithing, heavy and unyielding, fastened with thick, square-headed bolts that are black with age and cold. The scent hovering immediately around the marker is a subtle, crisp aroma of chilled iron and shaved ice, a clean, metallic tang that contrasts wonderfully with the lingering memory of the pine and hay from the shore. Kneel down gently upon the thick, unyielding surface of the river, right beside one of the freshly scored lines, and bring your attention to the absolute smallest details of the harvest's preparation. The groove is perhaps 2 inches deep, a perfect V-shaped trench carved into the dark, translucent body of the ice. Resting within this trench, and scattered lightly along its edges, is the byproduct of the marker's passing, a delicate, powdery snow created by the grinding of the heavy iron teeth. Pinch a small amount of this frost between your gloved fingers. It does not feel like the soft, fluffy snow that falls lazily from the sky. Rather, it possesses a distinct, granular texture, like the finest, most perfectly milled sugar or crushed diamonds. Under the direct gaze of the heavy platinum moon, these microscopic shards of shaved ice sparkle with a vibrant, prismatic intensity. They flash with tiny, momentary bursts of spectral color, a hint of deep sapphire here, a whisper of pale emerald there, a spark of soft ruby before settling back into their brilliant, glowing white. The act of observing these tiny glittering fragments is incredibly mesmerizing, pulling your focus down into a microscopic universe of light and cold, safely suspended within the larger, sweeping silence of the valley. It is a beautiful, silent reminder that even in the pursuit of monumental labor, there exists a delicate, intricate, and deeply peaceful beauty. Let your eyes follow the glowing line of crushed ice as it travels endlessly away from you, a continuous path of stardust leading into the deep, quiet heart of the winter night, lulling your wandering thoughts into a state of perfect, geometric serenity. The cold air breathes slowly over the frozen landscape, carrying away the last vestiges of your waking stress, leaving only the tranquil, orderly silence of the harvest grid. Let us gently leave the mesmerizing, glowing geometry of the harvest grid, tracing our steps back toward the towering shadow of the shoreline. We walk softly across the polished expanse, our path illuminated by the steady silver gaze of the heavy moon. Soon, a profound disruption in the solid landscape reveals itself. A long, perfectly straight canal that has been meticulously carved directly through the heart of the frozen river. This is the main channel, the liquid artery through which the massive, buoyant blocks of harvested winter will eventually float toward their slumbering wooden sanctuary. Standing at the very precipice of this deep cut, the contrast between the unyielding, solid plateau of the ice and the gentle, rhythmic fluidity of the exposed water is breathtaking. The edge where we stand is a sheer, vertical cliff of translucent crystal, dropping down nearly 2 feet before it meets the restless surface of the river. The water within the channel is astonishingly dark, possessing the profound, impenetrable blackness of polished obsidian or a starless midnight sky. Yet it is a living, breathing entity, undulating with a slow, heavy pulse that speaks of immense, unseen currents moving silently beneath the frozen crust of the world. The moonlight, which merely reflected off the solid ice, now seems to sink deep into the liquid channel, scattering into 1,000 shimmering silver scales that rise and fall with the gentle breathing of the tide. Lean closer to the edge, being careful to maintain your balance on the slightly slick, frost-dusted rim, because the exposed water is marginally warmer than the bitter sub-zero air of the deep night. A wondrous ethereal phenomenon occurs along the entire length of the canal. Veil of delicate, ghostly steam rises continuously from the dark surface, lifting into the night like the slow, synchronized breathing of the river itself. This mist is incredibly fine, a pale, translucent vapor that curls and twists in slow motion, forming beautiful fleeting shapes that dance briefly in the moonlight before dissolving entirely into the frigid atmosphere. As this gentle vapor washes over you, the sharp, dry scent of the frost is momentarily replaced by an incredibly rich, ancient aroma. It is the deep, mineral-heavy perfume of the river's hidden depths, carrying the faint, earthy memory of submerged stones, sleeping aquatic roots, and the pure, unfiltered essence of cold, flowing water. Accompanying this ancient fragrance is the sound of the water itself. Without the thick, muffling blanket of ice above it, the river speaks in a soft, hypnotic rhythm. It is a gentle lapping, a sequence of liquid slaps and hollow, resonant gurgles as the dark water strikes the sheer, frozen walls. The sound is remarkably similar to the slow, steady breathing of a sleeping giant, a peaceful cadence that naturally entrains your own breathing, coaxing your heart rate to slow. Let your gaze wander down into the narrow, liquid corridor. Floating upon the dark, undulating surface of the water are thousands of tiny, orphaned fragments of ice, cast off during the meticulous carving of the channel. These shards range in size from tiny, glittering diamonds to small, flat panes of translucent glass, engaged in a silent, perpetual ballet. As the water gently heaves and sighs, these delicate frozen leaves bob and weave, colliding with one another with a sound so faint, so fragile, it resembles the chiming of microscopic silver bells or delicate crystal wind chimes stirred by a phantom breeze. Watch a single flat chip of ice as it rotates slowly in the dark water. The moonlight catches its faceted edges, turning it into a momentary beacon of pure prismatic light before it dips beneath a tiny ripple, surfacing again moments later with renewed brilliance. The walls of the canal itself are a masterpiece of unintentional natural art, where the heavy steel saws have sheared through the crust. The exposed cross-section of the ice reveals a fascinating striated history of the winter. You can clearly see the distinct layers, a band of cloudy white ice at the top. Below that, a beautifully clear layer of pure black ice, and deeper still, veins of tiny trapped air bubbles that look like strings of luminous frozen pearls suspended forever in the crystal matrix. Following the long dark ribbon of the channel as it stretches back toward the eastern shore, the silhouette of a massive resting piece of machinery rises from the misty water. This is the great steam-powered elevator, the endless chain that bridges the gap between the liquid river and the towering heights of the icehouse. At this silent hour, its engines are entirely cold, its heavy gears locked in a state of profound metallic slumber. It is an awe-inspiring structure of heavy oak timbers and thick forged ironwork, resembling the skeletal ramparts of a medieval siege engine. The lower end of this massive conveyor dips gracefully beneath the dark surface of the channel, waiting patiently to scoop the heavy floating blocks. Extending upward from the water's edge, climbing toward the dizzying heights of the icehouse doors, is the long slatted wooden track. Running along this track is the chain itself, a formidable construction of heavy, square-linked iron, each link as thick as a man's wrist and black with a thick coating of protective grease. At regular intervals along this iron spine are fastened heavy wooden crossbars, known as hold bars, which act as the steps on this endless moving staircase. The scent surrounding the base of the elevator is a deeply industrial, comforting bouquet of cold, heavy iron, the sharp petroleum tang of thick lubricating grease, and the faint, lingering smell of coal dust, hinting at the fiery power that will awaken at dawn. Move closer to the immense wooden framework supporting the base of the elevator. The massive oak pilings, driven deep into the riverbed to anchor the structure against the shifting ice, are cloaked in a thick, knobby layer of frozen river spray. Over the course of the long, freezing nights, the splashing water has accumulated upon the wood, building up into fantastic bulbous shapes of cloudy white ice that completely obscure the timber beneath. These frozen adornments look like the heavy, dripping wax of a massive, extinguished candle, smooth and rounded by the relentless cold. Resting silently within the complex matrix of gears and chains is the primary bull wheel, a colossal circle of cast iron measuring over 8 feet in diameter. Its heavy cogged teeth are perfectly still, locked in a frozen embrace with the endless chain. Trace the path of the track as it rises away from the water, ascending at a steep, unyielding angle toward the high, dark loading doors of the windowless icehouse. The moonlight glints off the frosted iron links and polished wooden runners, creating a long, ascending pathway of pale silver that connects the liquid depths to the dry, sawdust-scented sanctuary in the sky. Standing here, listening to the gentle lapping of the water and gazing up at the magnificent, slumbering machinery, you are enveloped in a deep tranquility. Let your eyes slowly follow the glowing track upward, feeling your own consciousness becoming lighter, drifting effortlessly toward the high shadows, letting go of all earthly weight. Let us slowly turn our backs on the majestic, slumbering machinery of the river and begin a gentle ascent up the snowy embankment. We are leaving the crystalline, industrial heart of the harvest to seek the quiet, deeply human warmth that sustains it. The path upward is a gradual, meandering trail, carved through the deep drifts by the daily passage of dozens of men. As we walk, the intense metallic chill of the open water channel slowly begins to fade from the air, replaced by a softer, more forgiving atmosphere nestled among the dense, sheltering pines. The physical effort of the climb is minimal, just enough to bring a slow, comforting warmth to your limbs, a gentle awakening of your own internal fire that counteracts the biting midnight frost. Through the dark, intersecting branches of the evergreens ahead, a beacon of welcoming light reveals itself. It is the large, sprawling wooden boarding house, a temporary home constructed specifically to house the army of harvesters throughout the brutal winter months. Against the vast indigo canvas of the night sky, its silhouette is broad and deeply reassuring. From the heavy stone chimney perched atop its snow-laden roof, a thick, twisting ribbon of pale grey smoke rises lazily into the starlit canopy. The scent of this smoke drifts down to meet us on the path, an incredibly rich, intoxicating aroma of seasoned hickory and sweet maple wood. It is a fragrance that speaks universally of shelter, of safety, and of a warm hearth waiting patiently at the end of a long, freezing day of labor. We approach the broad wooden porch of the building. The floorboards here are swept clean of the deepest snow, though a fine, sparkling dust of frost still clings to the grain of the wood. The entrance is guarded by a heavy door made of thick vertical oak planks, bound together by dark hammered iron straps. You reach out and press your palm against the large, rounded iron latch. It lifts with a heavy, satisfying mechanical click, a sound that is both solid and deeply secure. Pulling the door open, we do not step directly into the main living quarters, but rather into a designated transitional space, the mudroom. As the heavy door swings shut behind us, cutting off the vast silence of the winter wilderness, we are instantly enveloped in a completely different sensory world. The air in this small enclosed room is thick, warm, and remarkably humid, a stark contrast to the brittle, bone-dry frost just inches away on the other side of the timber wall. The walls of this long, narrow space are lined with hundreds of heavy, hand-carved wooden pegs. Hanging from these pegs is a veritable forest of heavy woolen coats, damp scarves, and thick knit caps. The immediate scent is overwhelmingly earthy and deeply human, a rich, complex bouquet of damp sheep's wool, the pungent, oily aroma of waterproofed leather, the sharp tang of pine needles tracked in on heavy soles, and the lingering, sweet spice of pipe tobacco deeply woven into the fabric of the garments. Take a moment to observe the fascinating textural still life within this room. Along the floor, arranged in incredibly neat, orderly rows, sit dozens of pairs of heavy working boots. These are not refined, elegant shoes, but massive utilitarian fortresses of thick leather and iron tacks, built to withstand the freezing slush of the river. The leather of these boots is scarred, scraped, and deeply creased, telling a silent visual story of countless miles walked over unyielding ice. Because they have been sitting in the warmth for several hours, the snow that once clung to them has melted, forming small, dark, reflective pools of water upon the rough-hewn floorboards. Above the boots, look closely at one of the heavy wool coats hanging from its wooden peg. The fabric is astonishingly thick, a rough, scratchy weave of dark navy and charcoal grey yarn. In the dim light filtering through the cracks of the inner door, you can see the individual coarse fibres of the wool, some still retaining tiny glistening droplets of melted snow. The garments hang heavily, completely exhausted of their shape, like quiet, sleeping sentinels resting until they are called upon again at dawn. The air in the mudroom is heavy with the smell of lanolin, the natural grease of the sheep's fleece that has not been completely scoured away, providing a crucial natural waterproofing against the elements. This earthy, animalistic warmth is deeply grounding, a profoundly comforting reminder of the simple physical realities of surviving and thriving in the heart of winter. Moving past the damp woolen forest of the mudroom, we gently push open the inner door and step into the vast, sprawling expanse of the main common room. The transition is magnificent. The air here is not merely warm, it is a radiant, enveloping embrace that sinks instantly into your bones, melting away the last, lingering memories of the river's freezing breath. The primary source of this luxurious heat is a truly colossal fieldstone fireplace that dominates the entire far wall of the room. The fire itself has long since burned down from a roaring blaze, leaving behind a massive glowing bed of deep crimson and bright orange coals. This banked fire is a masterpiece of thermal energy, pulsing with a slow, steady, hypnotic rhythm. Let us walk toward this magnificent hearth and stand before it. The heat radiating from the stones is a physical force, pressing gently against your face and hands like a warm, heavy blanket. Stare deeply into the heart of the embers. The colors are mesmerizing, a chaotic, shifting landscape of deep, velvety cherry red, brilliant, searing tangerine, and the soft, ghostly white of the fine, powdery ash that coats the edges of the dying logs. Occasionally, a pocket of trapped sap within the remaining wood reaches its boiling point, resulting in a soft, muffled hiss, followed by a tiny brief fountain of golden sparks that dance upwards into the dark soot-stained throat of the chimney. The stones surrounding the firebox are massive, irregular boulders pulled directly from the local fields, their surfaces blackened by years of smoke, yet they retain and radiate the fire's heat with a slow, ancient patience. The vast common room itself is a study in quiet, orderly rest. Running down the centre of the space are three incredibly long, heavy dining tables, constructed from thick slabs of roughly planed pine. The surfaces of these tables are a tactile map of communal living, deeply scarred by the blades of pocket knives, stained by countless spilled mugs of dark coffee, and polished to a dull, handsome sheen by the friction of hundreds of resting forearms. In the centre of the middle table rests a single solitary object, a small battered tin mug. The metal is dull and heavily dented, possessing a slightly metallic, bitter scent that speaks of strong, chicory-laced coffee long since consumed. The only light in the room, aside from the pulsing crimson glow of the hearth, comes from a single kerosene lamp turned down to its absolute lowest setting. It rests upon a small side table, its flame a tiny, perfectly still teardrop of pale yellow light, casting long, wavering amber shadows across the empty wooden chairs and the bare, sweeping floorboards. In the far corner of the room, standing like a tall, silent guardian of the night, is an old wooden grandfather clock. Its presence is defined not by its appearance in the gloom, but by its sound. The heavy brass pendulum swings back and forth with a slow, deliberate, and incredibly rhythmic cadence. Tick-tock. It is a deep, resonant, hollow sound that does not rush, but simply measures the slow, peaceful passing of the midnight hours. The acoustic environment of the room is defined by this solitary, mechanical heartbeat, a sound so regular, so perfectly spaced, that it naturally lulls your own racing thoughts into a state of deep, synchronized calm. Just beyond the dining area, a wide, open doorway leads into the sprawling dormitory where the harvesters sleep. We do not enter, but merely stand at the threshold, observing the profound collective peace of the bunk room. The space is filled with row upon row of sturdy wooden bunk beds, disappearing into the warm, shadowed depths of the room. Here, dozens of men are deep in the embrace of exhaustion and restorative slumber. The sound emanating from this room is a soft oceanic murmur, the combined rhythmic breathing of deep, uninterrupted sleep. It is a chorus of slow inhales and long, heavy exhales, a deeply hypnotic sound that washes over you in gentle waves. Focus your eyes on the bunk nearest the doorway. The sleeping figure is completely buried beneath a mountain of heavy bedding. The topmost layer is a magnificent hand-stitched patchwork quilt. Even in the dim, ambient light of the dying fire, you can perceive the intricate, chaotic beauty of its construction. It is made from hundreds of tiny, mismatched squares of fabric, faded indigo calico, muted madder red flannel, and scraps of tough brown canvas. If you were to gently touch the surface of this quilt, you would feel the slightly raised, meticulously even rows of tiny cotton stitches that bind the heavy, insulating batting inside. The quilt is heavy, a weighted blanket of history and necessity that pins the sleeper safely to the mattress, cocooning them in a profound, inescapable warmth. The scent drifting from the dormitory is a soft blend of strong lye soap, the clean, herbaceous aroma of bay rum used after a rare shave, and the undeniable honest scent of deep, restful sleep. Standing here at the threshold, bathed in the radiant heat of the glowing coals, listening to the slow, metallic heartbeat of the clock and the oceanic breathing of the men, you feel your own eyelids growing incredibly heavy, your mind surrendering completely to the overwhelming, peaceful sanctuary of the boarding house. Slowly, deliberately, we pull ourselves away from the intoxicating, wood-scented threshold of the dormitory. The heavy, iron-bound oak door of the boarding house closes behind us with a muffled, definitive click, sealing the radiant heat and the collective, rhythmic sigh of the sleeping men safely within its protective walls. We are once again standing upon the frosted boards of the porch, the biting, crystalline air of the midnight Hudson Valley rushing forward to greet us. The transition back into the cold is not a harsh shock, but rather a deeply refreshing awakening, a cool, soothing cloth laid gently across a tired brow. The lingering oven-like warmth of the great stone hearth remains trapped deep within the thick, dense fibers of your heavy wool coat, acting as a personal radiant barrier against the sudden plunge in temperature. As we turn away from the dark, slumbering fortress of the boarding house, we begin our slow, meandering descent back down the winding, snow-packed trail toward the river bottom. The moonlight, filtering through the heavy, drooping branches of the ancient evergreens, casts a beautiful latticework of intricate, shifting shadows upon the pale, blue-tinted snow. The silence of the forest is absolute, broken only by the dry, powdery squeak of our boots sinking into the hardened crust. The descent is effortless, a gentle downward glide that mimics the slow, yielding surrender to heavy sleep. You breathe in the sharp, metallic tang of the winter air, feeling it cleanse your lungs, washing away the heavy, lingering scents of wood smoke, damp wool, and slumber. Emerging from the edge of the tree line, the grand, dark mirror of the frozen river spreads out before us once more, vast and incomprehensibly still. Far out upon this empty expanse, standing dangerously close to the sheer edge of the deep water channel we observed earlier, is a single solitary point of amber light. It is the night watchman, a lone patient sentinel tasked with the most crucial and isolating job of the midnight hour, guarding the open arteries of the harvest against the relentless creeping return of the winter frost. We move softly across the slick, polished ice toward this distant, flickering beacon, our footsteps making no sound upon the hardened surface. As we draw nearer, his heavy, stooped silhouette gradually detaches itself from the surrounding curtain of darkness. He is a moving mountain of heavy, layered clothing, a human fortress completely insulated against the punishing, sub-zero draft that sweeps off the frozen water. His torso is wrapped in a voluminous, double-breasted coat of incredibly coarse, dark grey wool, the fabric so thick and stiff with cold that it barely creases as he moves. The high collar is turned up sharply to meet the brim of a battered, felt slouch hat pulled low over his brow, shadowing his eyes entirely. Thick hand-knitted woolen scarf, the colour of faded mustard and smelling faintly of damp sheep and old tobacco, is wrapped tightly around the lower half of his face. This heavy woolen mask completely obscures his features, transforming his constant exhalations into a thick, rhythmic plume of white steam that filters slowly through the dense yarn before dissipating into the starry void. In his thick, heavy leather-mittened left hand he holds a sturdy, square-panelled lantern, the source of the solitary golden glow. The frame of the lantern is constructed of dark, tarnished brass and pierced tin, featuring tiny hand-punched holes in the shape of simple stars that allow the smoke to escape. Its glass sides are heavily etched with delicate, fern-like patterns of creeping frost, a natural crystalline lace that blurs and softens the naked flame dancing within. This small, brave fire burns with a steady, wavering intensity, casting a warm, circular halo of amber light that extends barely 10 feet across the dark, polished ice, creating a tiny, safe island of illumination in an ocean of indigo shadows. The air immediately surrounding the watchman carries a new, highly distinct scent, the sharp, slightly sweet, and incredibly pragmatic aroma of burning kerosene. It is an industrial perfume that mingles strangely and beautifully with the pure, scentless void of the frozen night, anchoring the ethereal landscape to the reality of human labour. He stands at the very edge of the canal, his posture not one of tension but of a relaxed, enduring, and ancient patience. The dark water in the channel, which just a few hours ago flowed clear and black beneath the moon, is now engaged in a desperate, silent, and relentless battle to heal its severed surface, because the ambient temperature has plummeted into the deepest, most unforgiving digits of the midnight hour. The surface of the exposed river is actively, visibly freezing over once again. Lean down close to the water's edge, keeping perfectly still, and observe this microscopic, magical process occurring just inches from your boots. The water no longer possesses the look of dark obsidian. It has taken on a thick, sluggish, and heavy consistency, resembling a slow-moving slate-grey oil. This is the birth of fragile ice, millions upon millions of tiny, invisible, disc-shaped ice crystals forming in a state of suspension within the supercooled water. As these microscopic crystals become buoyant and rise to the surface, they begin to bond together, creating a delicate, translucent, and incredibly fragile skin known to the harvesters as grease ice. It is a sludgy, shifting layer that ripples heavily with the slight, unseen currents of the river below, possessing a strange, matted finish that seems to swallow the moonlight rather than reflect it. If left completely undisturbed in this brutal cold, this delicate floating film would rapidly multiply and thicken, hardening into a solid, impenetrable sheet of black ice long before dawn, rendering the channel useless and locking the massive harvest away beneath a fresh, unyielding crust. You can almost hear the water freezing, a sound so soft it is more of a sensation, a microscopic whispering, like the friction of fine, dry sand sliding gently across a pane of glass. It is the sound of the wild river quietly, stubbornly attempting to reclaim its natural frozen state, ignoring the deep scars carved by the heavy steel saws. This relentless, quiet freezing is exactly why the solitary watchman is here. He is not a boisterous laborer of the daylight, hauling heavy blocks with loud, ringing shouts. He is the quiet, rhythmic, and solitary caretaker of the dark. In his right hand he lightly wields his only tool, a long, slender pike pole, its 12-foot shaft turned from a single piece of pale, straight-grained ash. The wood of the pole is completely devoid of bark, sanded and polished to a glass-like smoothness by years of sliding endlessly back and forth through heavy, wet leather mittens. At the working end of this long wooden shaft is a blunt, forged iron tip, heavy, dark, and utterly unyielding. With a slow, fluid, and incredibly practiced motion, the watchman lifts the heavy pole slightly and plunges it straight down into the center of the dark, sluggish canal. Shuck. Splash. The sound is incredibly gentle, a muted, hollow, woody thud against the ice, immediately followed by the liquid, tearing sigh of the heavy water parting. The heavy iron tip effortlessly shatters the newly formed, matted skin of the grease ice, breaking the fragile, microscopic bonds of the suspended crystals. He then drags the long pole slowly and deliberately through the water, executing a sweeping lateral movement that aggressively stirs the dark current, mixing the warmer water from below with the freezing surface and effectively preventing the new ice from setting. As he smoothly lifts the pole from the heavy water to reset his stance, a cascade of dark, heavy droplets falls from the iron tip, striking the surface of the canal with a mesmerizing sequence of soft, melodic plinks. The river water clinging to the lower half of the wooden shaft freezes almost instantaneously upon contact with the frigid air, forming a thin, uneven, and incredibly clear glaze of ice that catches the amber light of his swinging lantern. The watchman's movements are profoundly hypnotic. Lift, plunge, sweep, lift. It is a slow, methodical, and unending waltz with the freezing river, a dance of endless, peaceful repetition that perfectly matches the slow, steady, resting heartbeat of a sleeping giant. He steps forward, moving one single, deliberate pace further down the endless, dark length of the canal, and seamlessly repeats the motion. He does not rush. There is no urgency, no panic in his labor, only the quiet, inevitable, and soothing necessity of the task at hand. He is completely alone in the vast, echoing bowl of the river valley, a tiny, solitary spark of life and warmth pushing back against the immense, crushing weight of the silent winter night. The steady rhythm of his work, the soft splash of the iron tip, the gentle, grinding whisper of the shattered slush, the dry, powdery squeak of his heavy boots taking a single step, becomes a soothing, mechanical, and deeply comforting lullaby. As you stand there, watching the golden halo of the lantern move slowly, inch by painful inch, down the misty canal, the mesmerizing repetition washes over you, coaxing your eyes to close and your mind to drift on the dark, peaceful current. Let us drift further out onto the immense frozen plain of the river, gently pulling our attention away from the rhythmic, solitary labor of the night watchman. The soft, liquid echoes of his heavy iron pike breaking the slush slowly fade into the vast, soundless expanse behind us, swallowed entirely by the immeasurable, crushing silence of the midnight valley. As we walk deeper into the untouched heart of the harvest grid, the ambient temperature seems to drop yet another barely perceptible fraction of a degree, reaching a profound, brittle depth where the very air feels as though it might shatter like thin glass. We are far from the shoreline now, far from the warm, breathing presence of the draft horses and the radiant, smoky sanctuary of the boarding house. Here, the world is reduced to its most elemental, majestic components: the deep, endless indigo of the starlit sky, the heavy platinum glow of the moon, and the perfectly flat, geometrically scarred mirror of the solid river beneath our heavy boots. The silence in this isolated stretch is not merely an absence of noise, it is a heavy physical presence, a thick, invisible blanket that wraps tightly around your shoulders, gently pressing you downward into a state of profound, inescapable lethargy. You can hear nothing but the incredibly slow, steady rhythm of your own internal heartbeat, a sound that resonates within your chest like a muted velvet drum, keeping perfect time with the slow, sleeping pulse of the winter earth. Resting quietly upon the precise, glowing intersection of two freshly cut silver lines is a dark, low-slung silhouette. It is a small, flat-bottomed wooden sled, a humble utilitarian vessel abandoned to the night by the masters of the grid. This hand-drawn sled was used during the fading daylight to transport the delicate instruments and heavy hand tools required for laying out the vast, mesmerizing checkerboard that stretches out before us. Let us approach this solitary artifact of labor, standing utterly motionless in the starlight. The sled is constructed of thick, rough-sawn planks of pale ash wood, fastened securely to two broad, heavy iron runners. Kneel beside it and observe the fascinating textures brought forth by the intense cold. The wood, completely stripped of any paint or protective varnish, has been worn incredibly smooth by the constant abrasive friction of ice and snow. Yet beneath its polished surface you can still trace the intricate flowing lines of the ash grain, resembling a topographic map of a forgotten miniature landscape. The heavy iron runners, designed to glide effortlessly over the hardened crust of the river, are coated in a beautiful dull patina of dark charcoal grey rust, a testament to their long, intimate relationship with freezing water. The scent hovering immediately around this small wooden island is incredibly subtle and pure. A faint, dry aroma of aged timber mixed with the sharp, clean, metallic tang of cold, resting iron. It is a scent that speaks of patient waiting, completely undisturbed by the rush of time. Resting atop the flat, wooden bed of the sled is a collection of heavy, specialized hand tools, left precisely where they were last set down, now slumbering deeply beneath the watchful gaze of the moon. Foremost among them is a massive, hand-forged, splitting chisel, known to the men as a starting spud. It is a formidable implement featuring a heavy, wedge-shaped head of solid steel attached to a thick, stout handle of deeply turned hickory. Lean in closely and examine the grip of this heavy tool. The lower portion of the wooden shaft has been meticulously wrapped in a long, continuous strip of thick brown leather, designed to provide a secure purchase for heavy, snow-caked mittens. This leather has absorbed the natural oils and the honest sweat of the men who wielded it, turning the material into a deeply creased, hardened shell that is nearly black in the shadows. Due to the plunging sub-zero temperatures, the leather wrap is now frozen entirely solid, transforming it from a pliable grip into an unyielding, rigid armor of dark hide. The thick, wedge-shaped blade of the spud, honed to a terrifyingly sharp edge for biting into the solid ice, catches the lunar light brilliantly. It is no longer a dull, utilitarian grey, but a shimmering, liquid silver, a mirror reflecting the silent, starry sky above. The sheer weight and density of the tool imply a frantic, exhausting labor, yet its current state of absolute stillness is profoundly calming, a reminder that all heavy burdens are eventually set down and laid to rest in the dark. Beside the heavy splitting chisel lies a thick, tightly wound spool of heavy hemp rope, the crucial measuring line utilized by the markers to ensure the absolute, unyielding straightness of their vast geometric design. This rope, measuring hundreds of feet in length, now rests in a state of rigid, frozen suspension. The harsh, biting air has sapped every ounce of flexibility from its woven strands, turning the once supple, flowing line into a solid, unmoving sculpture of tightly braided fibers. Look closely at the surface of the thick rope. The individual coarse threads of the pale brown hemp are clearly visible, each one covered in a microscopic, crystalline armor of hoarfrost. The natural moisture trapped deep within the organic fibers of the rope has been drawn to the surface by the extreme cold, freezing instantly to form thousands of tiny, needle-like icicles that bristle outward like the defensive spines of a slumbering sea urchin. If you were to tap the coil with a gloved finger, it would not yield or bend. It would emit a dull, hollow, woody sound, completely petrified by the midnight. The faint, earthy aroma of the dried hemp, smelling distantly of summer fields and warm, dusty barns, is trapped beneath this icy shell, offering a subtle, nostalgic contrast to the overwhelming, sterile purity of the frozen river. The precision and care required to coil this line so perfectly, even at the end of a long, exhausting day, speaks to a deep, rhythmic order that naturally soothes the restless mind. As we linger beside this quiet sled, studying the resting tools, a subtle, magical change begins to occur in the atmosphere. The sky above remains completely free of clouds, a vast, unbroken dome of deep indigo, yet the air around us begins to shimmer and sparkle. This is the phenomenon of diamond dust, microscopic, unattached ice crystals forming directly in the frigid, heavily saturated air, drifting slowly toward the surface of the river like a shower of pulverized starlight. The descent of these tiny crystals is impossibly slow, a hypnotic, weightless ballet that mesmerizes the eye. Watch as a single solitary flake floats lazily downward, caught in an invisible, microscopic current of air, before finally coming to rest upon the dark, frozen leather wrap of the heavy iron chisel. Lean down until your face is only inches away and observe this tiny, ephemeral miracle. It is a perfect, flawless hexagon, a star of incredibly complex, branching symmetry, finer and more delicate than the most exquisite lace. Its 6 crystalline arms are covered in secondary, microscopic branches, forming a geometric masterpiece of breathtaking fragility. Against the dark, rugged background of the worn leather, the flake shines with an impossible luminescent purity. A tiny temporary jewel forged from nothing but water and extreme cold. It does not melt, the freezing air preserves it perfectly, a frozen monument to the quiet beauty of the night. Allow your gaze to soften as more and more of this sparkling diamond dust settles upon the sled, upon the resting tools, and upon the heavy wool of your coat. The slow, relentless accumulation of these tiny, weightless crystals is deeply hypnotic, a visual representation of time slowly, quietly passing. As the frost builds upon the dark iron of the chisel and the stiff braids of the measuring line, their sharp edges and utilitarian purposes are gently blurred and softened. They are being reclaimed by the winter, wrapped in a soft, glittering blanket of white that smooths away all harshness and labor. This slow, peaceful burial mirrors the gentle, creeping heaviness in your own limbs, the slow, comforting surrender of your mind to the quiet embrace of sleep. Just as the sled and its tools rest patiently on the frozen river, offering no resistance to the falling frost, you too can let go of all effort, all worry, and all waking thought. The world around you is perfectly still, perfectly safe, and perfectly at peace, holding you in a deep, crystalline tranquility that will carry you safely through the long, quiet hours of the night until the unseen dawn. Let the sparkling diamond dust fall and let yourself drift. Let us slowly pivot our gaze away from the diamond-dusted sled, leaving those frozen, utilitarian instruments to their silent slumber upon the mesmerizing checkerboard of the ice. The immense, sprawling flatland of the river has held us in its profound, crystalline grip, but it is time to gently seek out the hidden, protective hollows nestled along the winding shoreline. We retrace our steps, moving with a gentle, unhurried cadence back toward the towering, slumbering silhouettes of the ancient hemlock trees. As we leave the completely exposed, glassy surface of the deep water, the texture beneath our heavy boots subtly but undeniably shifts. The polished, unyielding ice gradually gives way to a thick, undulating blanket of undisturbed snow resting upon the gentle incline of the riverbank. Each deliberate step we take sinks deeply into this soft white mattress, producing a muted, rhythmic sigh that perfectly underscores the immense, enveloping quiet of the valley. The moonlight filters downward through the dense, intersecting boughs of the evergreens overhead, projecting a complex, slowly shifting tapestry of pale silver and dark indigo shadows across our path. This gentle descent into the wooded shelter feels exactly like crossing a silent, invisible threshold, leaving the vast, echoing amphitheater of the winter sky for a much more intimate, enclosed sanctuary. As the sharp, metallic tang of the open river slowly fades from our senses, a new, completely distinct aroma gently threads its way through the heavy night air. It is a rich, earthy, and ancient perfume, a beautiful, subtle mingling of heavily charred wood, pulverized bituminous coal, and the dark, unmistakably dry scent of hot iron settling into a long, peaceful rest. Following this invisible aromatic ribbon through the hushed, snow-draped trees, we slowly come upon a small, solitary structure half buried in the protective swell of a sloping hill. This is the harvester's shoreline forge, the quiet, mechanical heart where the heavy steel saws are painstakingly sharpened and the massive iron tongs are endlessly repaired. At this midnight hour, the building is completely at rest, appearing more like a natural, slumbering outcropping of dark wood and stone than a structure of human design. The exterior walls are constructed from incredibly wide, thick planks of rough-sawn pine, their original golden hue having been long since consumed by years of deeply ingrained soot and harsh weather. They are now a rich, dark charcoal color blending seamlessly into the surrounding protective shadows of the ancient forest. Embedded within this dark wooden facade is a single small window. Its panes are thick, uneven, and heavily distorted, painted by the freezing air with a magnificent, intricate lace of white frost. Yet cutting bravely through this crystalline barrier is a faint, incredibly warm, and slowly pulsing glow of deep crimson light. It looks like a solitary, resting ember gently cradled in the palm of the frozen night, offering a silent, visual promise of the profound warmth hidden just beyond the heavy timber walls. We step up to the low, thick door, brushing past the heavy, snow-laden branches of a nearby pine that release a soft shower of glittering, powdery dust down upon our heavy wool shoulders. The latch holding the heavy forge door closed is a magnificent piece of utilitarian artistry, forged directly upon the very anvil that waits patiently inside. It is a heavy, dark iron lever, polished to a surprisingly smooth satin finish by the constant friction of countless heavy leather gloves. When you press your thumb against the cool, dark metal, it yields with a deep, incredibly satisfying mechanical clunk. As the thick wooden door swings slowly inward, the rusted iron hinges release a long, low, baritone groan that sounds exactly like the sleepy, resonant sigh of an ancient beast. The transition from the biting sub-zero wilderness into the interior of the forge is absolute, immediate, and incredibly soothing. A thick, almost physical wall of bone-dry, deeply penetrating heat washes entirely over you, instantly melting away the lingering metallic chill of the frozen river. As the heavy door gently closes behind us, sealing out the vast, echoing silence of the valley forever, the acoustic atmosphere completely transforms. The floor here is densely packed earth layered over decades with fine grey ash, crushed coal dust, and microscopic flakes of oxidized iron. This yielding, heavily textured ground absorbs our footsteps entirely, turning every single movement into a soft, muffled whisper. The air inside the forge is remarkably still, heavy, and completely saturated with the intoxicating industrial bouquet of manual labor. It smells deeply of raw sulfur, the sweet, nutty aroma of scorched linseed oil, the ghost of charred hickory wood, and the distinct musky scent of old resting leather. Our tired eyes slowly adjust to the dim, enchanting illumination of the room, drawn inevitably to the grand, soot-stained fieldstone hearth dominating the entire rear wall. This is the fiery womb of the forge, where the brilliant, roaring heat of the daytime labor has been meticulously and thoughtfully put to sleep. To perfectly preserve the precious embers through the long freezing night, the blacksmith has banked the fire, carefully covering the glowing heart with a heavy, thick blanket of dark, wet coal. Near the very center of this black mound, a small open crater reveals the magnificent, slow-breathing inferno hidden deep within. The colors gently pooling in this tiny depression are utterly mesmerizing. A slow, completely silent, shifting kaleidoscope of deep, velvety maroon, rich cherry red, and a bright, searing core of translucent molten orange. because the heavy leather bellows are completely at rest. The fire does not crackle or spit, it simply pulses with a slow, hypnotic and profoundly rhythmic intensity, flawlessly mimicking the steady resting heartbeat of the darkened room. The heat radiating outward is a dry, penetrating and ancient force that seems to seep directly into your aching bones, carrying a profound sense of deep earth and slow geological time. Watch carefully how the faint pulsing red light catches the microscopic particles of fine ash suspended in the perfectly still air, turning them into tiny luminescent cinders that drift lazily through the deep shadows, creating a silent, beautiful indoor snowfall of warm dust. Resting exactly where the pale, silvery moonlight filtering through the frosted window perfectly meets the deep crimson glow of the hearth stands the master's anvil. This monumental block of solid forged steel is anchored to a deeply scarred, incredibly thick stump of ancient oak, projecting a powerful aura of immense comforting stability. The flat rectangular face on the top has been polished to a brilliant, flawless, mirror-like sheen by the relentless heavy impact of 10,000 hammer blows. This perfectly smooth plane reflects the glowing embers with absolute clarity, beautifully resembling a calm, completely still pool of warm liquid metal. Resting quietly upon it is a single heavy cross-peen hammer. Carved from pale, straight-grained hickory, the wooden handle has been darkened and smoothed to a glass-like, undulating finish by the honest sweat and rhythmic grip of the blacksmith's hands. Hanging from a thick, hand-carved wooden peg near the doorway is the heavy leather apron. At rest in the dark shadows, it looks like a thick, discarded skin, holding the exact shape, deep creases, and weary posture of the man who wears it. The leather is astonishingly thick, a rich shade of oxidized mahogany heavily scarred with countless shallow hardened burn marks. Standing here in the totally isolated forge, entirely surrounded by slumbering tools and the slow, pulsing glow of the banked embers, the wandering mind is completely anchored to a profound sense of safety. The frantic metallic noise of the day's labor is entirely absent, safely leaving only a deep, resonant stillness that honors the deliberate effort of shaping steel, naturally allowing you to sink deeper and deeper into a state of unwavering, heavy calm. Slowly, with a deep sense of reverence for the slumbering embers, we turn our backs on the stone hearth of the forge. The heavy, iron-bound door of the smithy closes behind us with a resonant, muffled thud, its rusty hinges issuing a final, sleepy sigh before the latch drops into place with mechanical finality. Instantly, the profound, unyielding chill of the midnight valley rushes forward to embrace us once more, completely severing our connection to the dry, radiating heat of the banked coal fire. Yet the transition is remarkably gentle. The thick, heavy fibers of our woolen garments have absorbed and trapped the ambient warmth of the room, creating a deeply comforting personal microclimate that wards off the biting frost. As you inhale the incredibly pure, crystalline air of the night, the rich, industrial bouquet of sulfur and scorched wood smoke is immediately cleansed from your palate. It is replaced by the overwhelmingly crisp, scentless essence of deep winter, a sharp, metallic purity that awakens the senses while simultaneously soothing the tired mind. The silence of the completely exposed riverbank rushes back in to fill the void, a silence so vast, so incredibly heavy and absolute, that you can almost hear the soft friction of individual snowflakes settling against the weather-beaten planks of the forge's exterior wall. We step away from the small glowing window, allowing the sloping terrain to guide our slow, peaceful wanderings. Few dozen paces from the doorway of the forge, safely nestled beneath the sweeping, snow-laden branches of an enormous spruce tree, sits a quiet, undisturbed tableau of the midday respite. Here, half buried in the pristine, undulating drifts, rest two massive timber sleds. These utilitarian vehicles, utilized during the daylight hours to transport cumbersome equipment across the shoreline, now sit in a state of profound, heavy slumber. Approach the nearest sled and observe the fascinating marriage of rough-hewn wood and delicate frost. The main chassis is constructed from incredibly thick, solid beams of aged oak, a wood chosen for its magnificent, unyielding strength. The surface of these heavy beams is completely devoid of paint, exposing a complex topography of raised grain, deep fissures and the pale silver-grey patina of wood weathered by years of freezing rain. The moonlight softly traces these undulating lines, making the heavy timber look like the petrified remains of an ancient forest giant. The heavy iron runners beneath the sled are entirely submerged within the deep snow, anchoring the structure firmly to the frozen earth. The snow has draped gracefully over the hard geometric edges of the wooden bed, softening every sharp corner and transforming the machinery into a gentle mound of pale, sparkling white, neutralizing its utilitarian purpose and offering only deep rest. Serving as the focal point of this abandoned, snow-muffled resting area is a makeshift, completely frozen dining table, cleverly constructed from 3 heavy overturned shipping crates. These crates are pushed tightly together to form a remarkably broad, flat surface. The wood of these boxes is a softer pine, heavily splintered along the edges and deeply stamped with the faded insignias of distant merchant companies. Draped casually over the center of these crates, acting as a humble tablecloth, is a large section of heavy, unbleached burlap. Because it was left completely exposed to the plunging temperatures, the rough, coarsely woven fabric is now frozen entirely solid. Lean down closely, bringing your eyes mere inches from the surface, and marvel at the microscopic beauty of this frozen textile. The individual, pale brown threads of the jute fiber are thick, incredibly rough and slightly frayed, forming a dense grid of intersecting lines. Every microscopic fiber, every tiny stray hair protruding from the heavy weave, is completely encased in a delicate, perfectly clear sheath of hoarfrost. Under the heavy platinum gaze of the moon, this stiff, unyielding piece of common burlap has been miraculously transformed into a shimmering tapestry of pulverized diamonds, glittering with a quiet, breathtaking intensity that commands your slow, completely focused attention. Resting quietly upon this frozen, fibrous tablecloth is a solitary, poignant artifact of the harvester's labor. A forgotten tin drinking cup. It sits perfectly still in the moonlight, a small cylinder of dull grey metal waiting patiently in the dark. The surface of the cup is a highly tactile map of rugged, unforgiving use, heavily scarred by dozens of shallow indentations, gentle depressions, and deep scratches. Each tiny, unique dent catches the pale, silvery lunar light at a slightly different angle, creating a soft, uneven mosaic of shadows across its curved surface. The thick rolled rim of the tin cup is slightly darkened, perhaps from the repeated touch of heavy wool-mittened hands. Look deeply inside the small vessel. Resting at the very bottom is the frozen, perfectly preserved remnant of strong chicory coffee. The liquid has frozen completely solid, expanding slightly as it hardened to form a perfectly smooth dark brown mirror. This tiny, frozen pond reflects a singular, solitary star from the vast canopy above, capturing a microscopic piece of the heavens within its bitter depths. Sitting safely on the ground beside the crates, nestled deep within a thick bed of snow-covered ashes, is the heavy cast-iron kettle. Its rounded sides are dusted with a powdery layer of snow, and a long, perfectly clear icicle hangs absolutely motionless from the tip of its pouring spout. Scattered near the base of the heavy iron kettle, beautifully preserved by the deep enveloping freeze, are the final delicate remnants of the labourer's midday nourishment. These fragments provide a human connection to the vast landscape. Resting atop the pristine white snow is the heavy, hardened crust of a thick slice of dark rye bread. The bread is a rich shade of molasses brown, its porous, uneven surface dotted with tiny, pale caraway seeds. The extreme cold has drawn every ounce of moisture from the dense crumb, transforming the bread into a solid, unyielding object that feels as hard and permanent as a river stone. Just a few inches away lies the discarded core of a small winter-hardy apple. The skin of the apple is a beautifully muted shade of dark, rusty red, heavily wrinkled and shriveled by the freezing air. The exposed flesh has turned a uniform shade of pale brown, its natural sugars locked perfectly in a state of suspended animation by the penetrating frost. Even the tiny, dark, teardrop-shaped seeds resting within their star-shaped chambers are encased in a microscopic layer of clear ice. These small organic details are incredibly beautiful in their quiet stillness. They speak of a moment of shared warmth that has long since passed, leaving behind nothing but an echoing, deeply profound silence. draped heavily over the tall wooden backrest of the furthest sled, resembling a tired, stooped figure resting in the deep shadows, is a thick, darkly coloured woolen blanket. It was tossed there by a harvester returning to the ice, forgotten in the fading afternoon light. The deep navy blue fabric is overwhelmingly thick, covered entirely in a remarkably thick, fuzzy layer of delicate white rime ice, making the heavy wool look as though it has grown a pale pelt of its own. The folds of the blanket are stiff and completely immobile, frozen perfectly into the exact relaxed shape they took when they first landed against the rough oak planks. As you stand here, enveloped by the quiet, snow-muffled serenity of this abandoned resting place, a deep, incredibly heavy wave of exhaustion gently washes over your entire body. The meal is long finished, the heavy labour has been completely set aside, and the vast, beautiful world has entirely shut down for the night. There is nothing left to accomplish, only the slow, rhythmic breathing of the winter night urging you to close your eyes. Let the profound stillness of the frosted sleds and the deeply sleeping earth sink entirely into your mind, gently carrying you away on a peaceful tide of absolute rest. Let us turn our attention away from the forgotten resting place, gently leaving the snow-muffled timber sleds and the beautifully frozen, bitter chicory coffee to their silent midnight vigil. We begin a slow, highly deliberate ascent, moving slightly away from the expansive open plain of the river and cautiously venturing into a narrow, winding fissure cut deeply into the rising eastern embankment. This is a secluded, rocky gorge, patiently carved over countless millennia by the relentless rushing waters of a tributary stream that now slumbers completely beneath the winter's heavy, unyielding command. The path beneath our heavy boots changes significantly as we enter the cleft. The soft, deep drifts of powdery snow gradually give way to a steep, uneven and natural staircase composed of ancient, fractured shale and massive, rounded river stones. Each upward step requires a slow, mindful placement, forcing our wandering pace to slow even further, perfectly mimicking the lethargic, heavy rhythm of a deeply resting heartbeat. As we wander deeper into the narrowing stone ravine, the colossal, sprawling silence of the open valley is beautifully replaced by a highly concentrated, incredibly intimate acoustic environment. The towering, sheer vertical walls of dark stone act as a magnificent natural sound baffle, completely neutralizing any stray whisper of the wandering wind. The air here is astonishingly still, possessing a profound, heavy quality that feels thick, rich, and intensely pure in the lungs. It carries a deeply earthen scent, a dark, primal fragrance of sleeping moss, damp granite, and the pure, sharp essence of ancient subterranean ice. The moonlight, rather than washing evenly over a vast, flat expanse, now funnels downward in concentrated, ethereal beams, illuminating the falling diamond dust like slowly descending curtains of fine, silver lace. Run your gloved hand gently along the sheer, towering face of the rock wall to your right as we walk. The stone is impossibly cold, its dark, charcoal-grey surface slick with a thin, invisible layer of completely frozen condensation. Feel the complex geological texture beneath your thick leather mittens. There are sharp, jagged ledges where layers of brittle shale have sheared away centuries ago and perfectly smooth, undulating concavities meticulously carved by the friction of flowing water. Nestled deeply within these narrow, rocky crevices, clinging stubbornly to the unforgiving stone, are dense, dark patches of evergreen star moss. In the humid height of summer, this moss is a vibrant emerald green cushion, dripping with moisture and teeming with microscopic life. Now, it has been beautifully transformed by the plunging temperatures into a delicate, petrified forest of pale, silvery green crystal. Each tiny, intricately detailed, star-shaped leaf is perfectly encapsulated in a microscopic shell of clear ice, preserving its complex botanical structure in a state of flawless, suspended animation. If you were to brush these frozen tufts lightly, they would not yield, but rather emit a soft, brittle, and incredibly satisfying scraping sound, exactly like the friction of dry glass gently rubbing against heavy stone. The heavy protective shadows cast by the overhanging rock ledges create deep pools of absolute impenetrable darkness, a rich velvety blackness that naturally soothes the overstimulated eye and invites the weary mind to seek a profound, undisturbed rest. The sheer, towering scale of the enclosing gorge walls wraps around us like a massive protective blanket of solid earth, isolating us entirely from the anxieties and frantic pacing of the distant modern world. As we carefully navigate the final gentle curve of the stony pathway, the narrow gorge suddenly widens into a magnificent hidden amphitheatre of sheer rock, revealing a breathtaking, monumental spectacle of completely suspended motion. Here, arrested mid-fall by the brutal, unyielding breath of the deep winter, hangs a towering, magnificent frozen waterfall. It is a stunning visual paradox, a chaotic, violent rush of kinetic energy permanently locked into a state of absolute silent tranquility. Measuring nearly 40 feet from the high, rocky lip to the dark, snow-covered basin below, the cascade looks like a massive, intricate pipe organ carved entirely from translucent crystal and pale blue glass. The main body of the fall is not a single, flat, solid sheet of ice, but rather a highly complex, overlapping cathedral of colossal, vertically frozen pillars. Some of these icy columns are thicker than the ancient trunks of the hemlock trees standing outside the gorge, deeply fluted and heavily textured where the flowing water continuously froze over its own tracks, gradually building magnificent, undulating layers of milky white and deep oceanic cerulean blue ice. The pale moonlight strikes the irregular surface of this towering sculpture, penetrating deep into the translucent frozen layers, seemingly illuminating the massive cascade from within. It glows gently with an eerie, beautiful bioluminescent quality, radiating a soft, cool sapphire light that gently washes over the surrounding dark stone of the amphitheatre. It is a breathtaking monument to total stillness, a sweeping visual lullaby that physically demonstrates the absolute stopping of time itself, powerfully urging your racing thoughts to mimic its frozen, peaceful posture. Step much closer to the base of this frozen titan, moving cautiously over the heavily iced stones of the dry riverbed, and bring your total, focused attention to the intricate, microscopic details of its lower reaches. Where the rushing water finally struck the rocks before freezing, it has formed massive, blooming chandeliers of ice, thousands of individual, tapering stalactites hanging in deadly, silent perfection. Examine the very tip of one of these incredibly long, flawlessly clear icicles. It is as sharp as a diamond needle, yet it possesses a perfectly smooth, rounded, fluid surface tension that completely belies its rigid, petrified state. Deep within the core of the thickest, bluest ice pillars, trapped forever in the clear, freezing matrix, are thousands of tiny, perfectly spherical air bubbles. These bubbles, ranging in size from microscopic specks of silver dust to large, flat pearls of captured breath, were pulled down by the rushing current and instantly encased by the plummeting temperature. They form beautiful, swirling, static galaxies of trapped air within the solid ice, a mesmerizing, silent record of the water's final frantic plunge. The surface of the frozen basin at our heavy boots is heavily adorned with what the harvesters quietly call frost feathers. These are incredibly delicate, overlapping plates of crystalline ice that grow outward from the cold rocks in beautiful, sweeping, fan-like formations. They look exactly like the shed plumage of some giant, mythical snowbird, their pale edges incredibly fragile and deeply, perfectly serrated. When you exhale slowly, the warm plume of your breath washes over these delicate frost feathers, causing the microscopic crystals along their edges to momentarily catch the moonlight, sparkling brightly like a light dusting of crushed opals before your breath completely dissipates into the freezing air. Standing at the very foot of this towering, perfectly silent cascade, the encompassing sensation of time completely stopping is absolute and deeply overwhelming. This hidden gorge was once a place of deafening, chaotic noise, a roaring torrent of angry white water that echoed violently against the sheer stone walls. Now the silence is so incredibly profound, so intensely concentrated, it possesses a heavy physical weight that gently presses against your shoulders, softly coaxing you to sit, to rest, and to entirely surrender to the majestic stillness. Place your thick, gloved hand flat against the smooth, rounded, swelling belly of the largest ice column. Despite the heavy insulating layers of wool and leather protecting your skin, you can distinctly feel the immense drawing cold of the glacial mass, a deeply grounding, stabilizing thermal force that pulls the last remaining stubborn remnants of nervous energy completely out of your body, drawing it down into the deeply sleeping earth. As you gaze slowly upward, tracing the intricate, vertically fluted lines of the frozen pillars from the dark basin all the way to the starry lip of the gorge, let your own slow breathing perfectly mirror the absolute stillness of the ice. There is absolutely no rushing water to track, no sudden movement to anticipate, no heavy labor to perform. There is only the pale, sapphire glow of the trapped moonlight, the dark, highly protective embrace of the ancient stone walls, and the slow, heavy, profoundly comforting rhythm of your own heart. Let your heavy eyelids gently drift shut. The image of the glowing, frozen waterfall remains burned softly into your mind's eye, a beautiful, static beacon of perfect, unending rest, guiding you gently deeper and deeper into a completely untroubled, deeply healing slumber. Slowly, with the utmost reluctance, we pull our heavy, lingering gaze away from the bioluminescent sapphire glow of the magnificent frozen waterfall. The towering vertical cathedral of ice remains perfectly still, a silent sentinel locked in its stony amphitheatre, entirely undisturbed by our quiet departure. We turn our backs to the petrified cascade and begin to retrace our steps, moving cautiously over the heavily iced, rounded river stones that pave the floor of the narrow, winding gorge. As we slowly walk away from the massive, drawing cold of the glacial mass, the deeply concentrated, intimate acoustic environment of the rock walls begins to subtly shift and expand. The profound, heavy silence that pressed so closely against our ears gradually softens, expanding outward to merge once again with the vast, sweeping stillness of the larger valley. The scent of ancient subterranean ice and damp, sleeping moss slowly dissipates, beautifully replaced by a lighter, much crisper, and remarkably pure essence of elevated winter air. We navigate the final gentle curve of the dark stone corridor, running our thick leather-mittened hands along the incredibly cold, rough-hewn surface of the shale wall one last time. Feel the brittle, overlapping layers of the sedimentary rock beneath your heavy gloves, each tiny, jagged edge a quiet testament to millions of years of slow, silent geological pressure. The dark rock feels impossibly dense, an unyielding earthly anchor in a world rapidly becoming wrapped in soft, shifting white. As we cross the threshold where the towering stone walls finally give way to the gently rising slope of the embankment, the pale, silvery moonlight no longer funnels down in concentrated beams. Instead, it washes over us in a broad, gentle, and utterly peaceful wave, signaling our entrance into a new, beautifully elevated realm of the midnight landscape. The path before us now completely leaves the shadowy, sunken depths of the ravine and begins a slow, meandering ascent up the flank of a steep, heavily wooded hill. This is not the beaten, densely packed trail of the harvesters down by the river. It is a hidden, forgotten incline known only to the wandering deer and the solitary drifting owl. The climb is incredibly gentle, a rhythmic, deeply hypnotic upward progression that naturally regulates the slow, steady pacing of your heavy breath. With every soft, yielding step into the deeper, undisturbed drifts, your heavy boots compress the layers of fallen snow, releasing tiny, microscopic pockets of trapped, incredibly fragrant air. It is the subtle, nostalgic perfume of dried, crumbling autumn leaves that lie buried deep beneath the frost, a faint, earthy sweetness that perfectly balances the sharp, metallic tang of the sub-zero night. As we slowly ascend, the towering, ancient hemlock trees that heavily cloaked the lower shoreline gradually begin to thin out, gracefully surrendering their dense canopy to the vast, unbroken dome of the starlit sky. The heavy darkness recedes, replaced by an expansive, luminous, and deeply calming clarity. Notice a solitary ancient white pine standing quietly near the crest of the hill, acting as a majestic, silent gatekeeper to the heights above. Its remarkably long, soft needles are completely encased in a thick, shimmering layer of hoarfrost, transforming the heavy boughs into sweeping silver-laced fans that droop heavily toward the earth under the immense weight of the winter. When a microscopic phantom breeze gently stirs these frozen branches, they do not rustle. They emit a faint, breathtakingly delicate chiming sound, like the incredibly soft friction of 1,000 tiny crystal wind chimes brushing gently together in the dark. It is a deeply soothing musical whisper that encourages your heavy limbs to continue their slow, peaceful journey upward. Finally, we crest the gentle, rounded ridge of the hill, stepping entirely out of the encroaching shadows of the tree line and into a breathtaking amphitheater of open lunar light. Spread out before us, completely hidden from the sprawling mechanical theatre of the frozen river far below, is a vast, beautifully elevated snow meadow. This is a sanctuary of absolute unbroken purity. The heavy, unyielding geometry of the ice harvest, with its sharp, freshly scored lines and dark, open water channels, belongs to an entirely different, distant world. Here the landscape has been meticulously shaped only by the patient, wandering hands of the wind and the slow, heavy accumulation of countless midnight flurries. The surface of the meadow is a flawless, completely pristine ocean of soft, undulating white. There is not a single footprint, not a stray snapped twig, not the slightest indentation of a passing animal to disrupt the perfect sweeping smoothness of the snow. The fierce biting winds that occasionally scour the open valley have lovingly sculpted the surface of this elevated field into magnificent rolling dunes of dry powder. Look closely at the incredibly complex, completely organic topography of these frozen waves. The windward sides are swept perfectly smooth, polished to a dull, pearlescent sheen that softly reflects the heavy platinum glow of the moon. Conversely, the leeward sides gently slope away into soft, deeply textured depressions, creating a beautiful, mesmerizing sequence of rolling velvet shadows that transition seamlessly from pale, ghostly silver to the deepest, most melancholic shades of midnight blue. The sheer, overwhelming scale of this entirely untouched expanse is profoundly calming. It visually represents a world completely at rest, a flawless blank canvas that demands absolutely nothing of the weary observer, offering only a vast empty space to safely release the heavy, cluttered thoughts of the waking day. We stand at the very edge of this magnificent, pristine ocean, momentarily hesitating to break the absolute, flawless perfection of the frozen surface, but the heavy, enveloping softness of the meadow gently beckons, inviting us to become a quiet, temporary part of its silent history. Lift your heavy, wool-clad leg and take a single, highly deliberate step forward, placing your boot directly into the heart of the untouched powder. The physical sensation is utterly magnificent and deeply hypnotic. The snow here is not the densely packed, squeaking crust of the riverbank path. It is incredibly deep, exceptionally dry, and astonishingly weightless. As your foot sinks down, passing entirely through the soft crystalline layers, there is absolutely no resistance. It feels exactly like stepping into a vast bottomless pool of soft white feathers or sinking deeply into the most luxurious thick woolen mattress imaginable. The sound of this first footfall is incredibly muffled, a soft, yielding, and deeply resonant whumph as thousands of microscopic air pockets simultaneously collapse beneath your gentle weight. The powder is so incredibly dry that it does not cling to the heavy waterproofed leather of your boot. It simply parts fluidly like heavy water, swirling softly around your ankle and calf before beautifully settling back into a state of total undisturbed rest. The physical effort required to push through this deep, dry powder is a slow, rhythmic, and incredibly comforting exertion, mimicking the heavy, lethargic movements that always precede a deep, healing sleep. Take another slow, heavy step and then another, wading peacefully out into the very center of the softly glowing meadow. With each forward motion, your tired muscles must gently push and then completely relax, sinking back into the soft, supportive embrace of the yielding snow. Stop moving entirely and stand perfectly still in the absolute center of the hidden field. Turn your head very slowly and look back the way we have come. Winding backward towards the dark, sheltering silhouette of the trees is a single solitary trail of deep, dark blue footprints. This perfectly straight line is the only mark upon the entire vast world, a quiet, temporary record of your peaceful journey. Staring at this solitary trail, a profound, beautiful realization gently washes over your tired mind. These footprints represent the past, the journey completed, the heavy burdens safely set down. They are slowly, inevitably being filled in by the endless microscopic shower of descending diamond dust, gently erased by the patient, forgiving hand of the winter night. You do not need to walk back. You do not need to move forward. You simply need to stand here completely enveloped in the waist-deep, weightless powder, anchored safely to the sleeping earth, while the vast starry dome of the heavens slowly revolves above your heavy head. The air is so incredibly pure it feels like breathing cool, liquid light, cleansing away the very last traces of waking tension. Let your knees soften, let your heavy shoulders completely drop. The deep, pristine snow is holding you perfectly, supporting your entire weight, wrapping you in a profoundly silent, heavy, and incredibly beautiful blanket of total unending peace. Let us slowly wade through the waist-deep, weightless powder, moving deliberately toward the far western edge of this magnificent elevated snow meadow. The profound, yielding resistance of the pristine snow against our heavy woolen trousers is a constant rhythmic reminder of the deeply sleeping world that surrounds us. With each slow, deliberate push forward, the soft, muffled whump of the collapsing air pockets beneath our boots serves as a gentle, hypnotic metronome, measuring our peaceful progress across the hidden field. As we gradually approach the dark, ragged boundary where the sprawling, luminous meadow meets the ancient, heavily shadowed tree line, a subtle, anomalous shape begins to detach itself from the surrounding, undulating drifts. It is not the organic, chaotic form of a snow-bowed sapling or a sleeping boulder, but an object of distinct, deliberate human geometry, quietly enduring the brutal winter in absolute isolation. We close the distance slowly, our heavy breath pluming in thick silver clouds that momentarily obscure the stars before dissolving into the freezing void. Here, standing as a silent, forgotten sentinel at the very edge of the woods, half swallowed by the relentless accumulation of the midnight snow, is an ancient heavy stone sundial. It is a profound, beautifully melancholic artifact, a masterfully carved instrument of daylight and rushing hours, now completely paralyzed and rendered beautifully useless by the deep, eternal darkness of the winter night. Let us carefully approach this completely frozen monument, sinking deeply to our knees in the soft, dry powder beside its sturdy base. The sundial is carved from a massive, singular block of native Hudson Valley bluestone, a remarkably dense, heavy material that has absorbed centuries of deep geological cold. The pedestal is thick and remarkably sturdy, featuring wide, elegant fluting carved into its sides that mimics the classical architecture of a forgotten era. Over the countless decades it has stood here, nature has slowly, patiently reclaimed the stone. The deeper grooves of the fluting are choked with thick, dark patches of ancient lichen and dense star moss. In the height of the summer sun, these organic colonies are soft and vividly green, but tonight they are completely petrified, encased in microscopic, flawless shells of clear ice. Run your thick, leather-mittened hand gently along the exposed, rounded curve of the stone pedestal. Despite the thick insulation of your glove, you can feel the immense drawing cold of the rock, a temperature so profoundly deep that it feels like touching the very foundation of the earth itself. The stone is covered in a delicate, incredibly fine layer of diamond dust, catching the pale lunar light and making the heavy dark bluestone sparkle faintly, as if the rock itself is slowly exhaling pulverized stars. It projects an aura of immense, unyielding permanence, a heavy anchor in a landscape that is constantly shifting and swirling with the wind. Gently, using the side of your thick woolen sleeve, brush away the thick overhanging cornice of snow that has built up upon the flat, circular face of the dial. The snow sweeps away effortlessly, a dry, powdery cascade that reveals the intricate, heavily weathered face of the ancient timepiece. Etched deeply into the flat surface of the bluestone are the classic Roman numerals, heavily worn by generations of acidic rain and driving sleet, yet still distinctly visible in the shadowy depressions. The freezing air has meticulously filled these carved numbers with tightly packed, brilliantly white hoarfrost, making the ancient hours stand out with a stark, glowing contrast against the dark, charcoal-grey stone. Rising exactly from the center of this frozen clock face is the gnomon, the heavy, triangular piece of forged metal designed to cast the telling shadow. It is crafted from thick cast bronze, a metal that has oxidized over the long years, trading its original warm golden hue for a deep, rich and heavily textured verdigris green. This metallic fin has been entirely enveloped by the winter, coated in a magnificent jagged layer of rime ice that points fiercely toward the North Star. The sharp, aggressive angle of the gnomon looks like a frozen metallic shark fin breaking the surface of a dark, stone sea, holding its completely rigid posture against the crushing weight of the midnight cold. To gaze upon this completely frozen sundial under the heavy platinum light of the moon is to profoundly reflect upon the very nature of time and our frantic waking relationship to its passing. Down in the vast echoing valley below, the entire existence of the ice harvesters is absolutely dictated by the relentless ticking of the clock. They are engaged in a desperate, deeply exhausting race against the creeping thaw, their heavy labor entirely measured by the rising and setting of the sun, the thickness of the ice and the fast approaching warmth of the coming spring. Theirs is a world of urgent, finite time, segmented into brutal shifts and frantic quotas, but here, standing before this snow-buried stone on the elevated edge of the world, time has completely fundamentally stopped. The sundial, an instrument born to track the frantic moving fire of the sun, is entirely blind in the moonlight. The pale silvery rays of the heavy moon strike the frosted bronze gnomon, casting a faint ghostly and completely stationary shadow across the frozen Roman numerals. This pale shadow does not slowly creep forward to announce the next hour of labor. It simply rests perfectly still, pointing vaguely into the dark, measuring absolutely nothing but the profound, eternal depth of the present moment. It is a visual representation of eternity, a beautiful, heavy reminder that the rushing, panicked pace of the daylight world is entirely an illusion, suspended entirely by the vast, sleeping breath of the winter night. The deep, geological permanence of the stone profoundly dwarfs the fleeting, frantic anxieties of a single human day. Think of the hands that meticulously chiseled those numbers, the master stonemason whose heart beat with the same warm, hurried rhythm as your own, whose life was a brief, bright spark against the dark, endless canvas of history. They are gone, their daily worries and pressing deadlines completely dissolved into the mist, yet their heavy, silent monument remains, patiently enduring the crushing weight of 100 brutal winters. This beautiful realization does not bring a sense of melancholy, but rather a profoundly deep, comforting wave of absolute relief. If the heavy carved stone can surrender its purpose to the snow, if the instrument of time itself can simply cease to count the passing hours, then so too can your restless, wandering mind. You are entirely permitted to let go of the rigid schedule, to completely release the heavy burden of the approaching dawn, and to gently detach from the frantic, rushing current of your waking life. There are absolutely no hours to track here, no appointments to keep, and no urgent tasks waiting in the frozen dark. There is only the incredibly slow, heavy, pulsing rhythm of the resting earth, the silent, glittering fall of the diamond dust, and the deep, inescapable sanctuary of the present second. As you stand quietly over the frozen face of the dial, let the profound, heavy stillness of the ancient stone seep entirely into your tired bones. Let your own internal clock slowly wind down, grinding to a peaceful, permanent halt beneath the heavy, starlit sky, allowing you to drift completely untethered into the vast, timeless ocean of a deep, deeply healing sleep. Slowly, gently, with a profound sense of leaving the heavy, unyielding weight of measured time entirely behind us, we take our first deliberate steps away from the completely frozen ancient bluestone sundial, the heavy bronze gnomon, locked in its magnificent icy armor, slowly fades into the swirling, starlit mist as we turn our quiet gaze toward the softly dipping perimeter of the elevated meadow. The deep, weightless powder of the open field continues to yield with that same incredibly soft, muffled warmth beneath our heavy woolen boots, creating a slow, deeply hypnotic metronome that dictates the peaceful, lethargic rhythm of our wandering. Moving further westward, following the gentle natural contour of the land, the terrain slowly begins to dip, naturally forming a shallow, perfectly sheltered, and beautifully secluded terrestrial bowl. Here, the towering, dark, and wildly chaotic evergreens that have dominated the untamed perimeter of the forest gracefully give way to something beautifully distinct, something planted by patient, methodical human hands long before the heavy, iron-jawed harvesters down on the river ever lifted a single steel saw. It is an ancient, entirely forgotten, and completely snowbound apple orchard. The transition from the wild, sweeping meadow into this hushed, cultivated sanctuary is incredibly subtle. The trees are arranged in wide, spacious, incredibly straight rows, a ghostly agricultural grid that faintly echoes the vast, glowing checkerboard of the ice harvest far below. Yet this pattern possesses none of the harsh, frantic urgency of the river. Instead, it projects a deep, melancholic, and overwhelmingly peaceful order. The intense biting wind that occasionally scours the high open fields is completely broken here by the surrounding topography, leaving the air within the orchard astonishingly still, heavy, and saturated with a profound, unbroken silence that gently commands the racing mind to slow down and listen. As we wade slowly down the central avenue of these slumbering guardians, the unique, breathtaking architecture of the ancient apple trees reveals itself in the heavy, platinum glow of the midnight moon. Unlike the straight, proud, and unyielding verticality of the shoreline pines, these ancient hardwoods possess a beautifully chaotic, profoundly expressive, and deeply stooped geometry. They are remarkably short, incredibly stout, and heavily gnarled, looking exactly like a congregation of weary, bent-backed elders who have completely surrendered to the immense, crushing weight of countless passing decades. Their thick, dark branches do not reach upward in a straight, triumphant line. Rather, they twist, contort, and spiral outward in magnificent, agonizingly slow and sweeping arcs. They resemble the heavy, arthritic fingers of an incredibly patient artisan, frozen perfectly mid-gesture by the sweeping breath of the sub-zero night. The deep, undisturbed snow has lovingly embraced these crooked, organic shapes, settling thickly along the upper ridges of every twisted limb. This creates a mesmerizing, high-contrast visual display. The undersides of the branches are a deep, velvety, impenetrable charcoal black, while their upper surfaces are coated in a thick, rounded, and brilliantly glowing layer of pristine white powder. The moonlight filters downward through this skeletal, snow-laced canopy, casting a complex, beautifully intricate, and completely stationary web of dark, interwoven shadows across the flawless, undulating surface of the white snow below. Walking through this quiet, perfectly still maze of twisting shadows and glowing bark is deeply hypnotic, a slow visual labyrinth that naturally entangles and completely neutralizes the scattered, anxious thoughts of the waking world, gently pulling your consciousness deeper into a state of heavy, absolute rest. Let us approach the nearest of these magnificent, slumbering sentinels. Sink deeply into the soft, undisturbed powder right at the very base of its thick, wildly twisting trunk, bringing yourself intimately close to the ancient wood. The bark of the apple tree is a fascinating, highly textured, and microscopic landscape all its own. It is not smooth or uniform, but rather composed of thousands of brittle, overlapping, and beautifully curling plates. Some of these tiny wooden scales are peeling away in delicate, papery strips, exposing the smoother, slightly paler heartwood beneath. Nestled deeply within the dark, vertical crevices of this heavily armored trunk are thick, ancient colonies of pale grey-green lichen and dormant, completely petrified moss. The intense, penetrating cold has completely drained the moisture from these tiny organic structures, turning them into dry, rigid, and microscopic coral reefs clinging stubbornly to the dark wood. Gently remove your thick leather mitten and press your bare palm completely flat against the rough, freezing surface of the trunk. The initial sensation is a sharp, breathtaking shock of absolute cold, but it is immediately followed by a profound, deep-seated sense of immense, unyielding stability. You can actually feel the heavy, dormant density of the tree, a powerful, grounding physical anchor that reaches deep into the frozen earth. Lean in closely, closing your eyes, and slowly inhale the incredibly subtle, complex aroma hovering just millimeters from the bark. It is a faint, beautifully nostalgic fragrance, a ghost of sweet, fragrant apple blossoms, the rich, earthy memory of heavy fermented autumn cider, and the remarkably clean, sharp and metallic essence of the deep winter frost. It smells of complete, absolute patience. Follow the twisting, chaotic line of a thick, snow-covered branch outward, carefully tracking its path as it tapers down into smaller, thinner, and increasingly delicate wooden twigs. At the very tip of the thinnest, most fragile-looking shoot, completely exposed to the brutal, unforgiving reality of the freezing midnight air, is a single microscopic marvel, a tightly coiled, completely dormant leaf bud. Lean in until your warm breath momentarily clouds the freezing air around it. This tiny teardrop-shaped node is completely encased in a flawless, perfectly clear, and microscopic shell of solid ice, transforming it into a tiny, suspended jewel of frozen amber. To the casual, hurried eye, quickly scanning this vast, frozen wasteland, the entire orchard appears completely, unequivocally dead. The branches are entirely barren, the wood is freezing to the touch, and there is absolutely no visible movement, no flowing sap, no green life to be found. But this is the profound, beautiful, and deeply comforting illusion of the winter night. This tree is not dead, it actively, deliberately chose this state. It is currently engaged in the deepest, most essential, and profoundly necessary act of biological preservation. Months ago, as the days grew short and the heavy frost first threatened, the tree purposefully withdrew all of its vital flowing sap deep down into its massive root system, systematically shutting down its vulnerable extremities to protect its magnificent core. It willingly shed its beautiful leaves, dropped its heavy fruit, and surrendered its outward vitality to the cold, retreating into a state of absolute unyielding and perfectly calculated suspended animation. Think of the massive, incredibly complex, and heavily intertwined network of ancient roots spreading out endlessly beneath our heavy boots, safely insulated and perfectly protected by the thick, heavy and completely undisturbed blanket of the deep meadow snow. Down there in the pitch-black, silent depths of the earth, the true, vibrant life of the orchard is safely waiting, patiently holding on to its vital energy in a state of deep, restorative, and profoundly necessary slumber. This beautiful, silent realization mirrors the deepest, most fundamental truth of our own profound need for sleep. We so often view our exhaustion as a failure, a terrible loss of waking time, or a dark, empty void that interrupts our frantic daily harvest. But the ancient sleeping apple tree softly whispers a completely different, profoundly comforting truth. Sleep is not an absence of life, it is the ultimate magnificent preservation of it. It is the necessary quiet retreat into our own deep roots, the deliberate peaceful shedding of our daily burdens and waking anxieties to protect our vital inner core against the cold, exhausting winds of the day. As you kneel here in the soft, deep powder, completely surrounded by these twisting, silent, and incredibly patient guardians, allow their profound wisdom to seep entirely into your heavy limbs. You do not need to bloom right now. You do not need to produce, to labor, or to desperately hold on to the frantic energy of the sun. You are entirely permitted and beautifully encouraged to completely let go, to retreat deeply into the warm, safe, and completely silent sanctuary of your own resting mind, safely waiting for a dawn that you do not need to worry about tracking. Let the heavy, twisting branches stand guard over your peaceful rest, and simply let yourself drift. Let us slowly rise from our knees, deeply comforted by the ancient, silent wisdom of the sleeping apple orchard. We step carefully out of the soft, deep bowl of the gnarled trees, our boots continuing their slow, rhythmic and weightless waltz through the pristine dry powder. The crooked, snow-covered silhouettes of the ancient trunks gradually recede into the silvered midnight haze behind us, leaving their profound, patient stillness burned softly into our memory. We wander toward the lowest, most sheltered dip where the perimeter of the orchard meets the sharp, rising incline of the main hillside. Here, built directly into the dark, maternal womb of the earth itself, sits a low, moss-grown hummock of solid stone. This is the old root cellar, a subterranean fortress constructed generations ago to preserve the true, life-sustaining bounty of the summer against the relentless, killing advance of the winter frost. We approach the entrance slowly, our heavy breath pluming out in slow, peaceful clouds that dance briefly in the starlight before vanishing. The door to this hidden sanctuary is incredibly small and low-slung, made of thick, heavy slabs of split oak that have turned a deep, weather-beaten charcoal grey with age. It is held shut by a massive, hand-forged iron latch that is black with rime frost. You reach out and press the lever. The metal feels incredibly cold, yet completely smooth, yielding with a dull, heavy, and reassuring mechanical thud that echoes softly against the stone. Pulling the heavy oak door open just wide enough to slide through, we step over a thick stone threshold and descend a brief flight of 3 rough-hewn stone steps. As the heavy wooden barrier gently closes behind us, shutting with a soft, definitive click, the transition is immediate, overwhelming, and deeply comforting. The vast, starry sky and the intense sub-zero chill of the midnight valley are entirely severed. Locked away on the other side of the thick earth, we are now enveloped in a profound, heavy, and completely unchanging subterranean stillness. The air inside this root cellar is remarkably different from the brittle, bone-dry frost outside. It is thick, cool, and beautifully humid, possessing a stable, earth-insulated temperature that remains perfectly, reliably constant, entirely indifferent to the howling winter blizzards or the searing heat of the summer sun. The floor beneath our boots is damp, tightly packed clay, which completely swallows the sound of our footsteps, turning every movement into an absolute, velvety silence. Instantly, your senses are wrapped in an incredibly rich, complex, and intoxicatingly grounding tapestry of aromas. It is the deep, dark perfume of the living earth itself, heavily mingled with the sweet, wine-like scent of fermented apples, the dusty, dry aroma of clean straw, and the sharp, mineral tang of wet granite walls weeping slowly in the dark. It is the aroma of absolute security, smelling deeply of provisions safely gathered, protected, and laid to rest. As your eyes gradually adapt to the enveloping, velvety darkness, the architecture of the vault slowly reveals itself in the soft, ethereal light filtering through a single, tiny ground-level ventilation slit high up on the wall. Solitary beam of pale silver moonlight slices down through the gloom, striking the rough, irregular surface of the opposite wall, like a silent, glowing pillar. The cellar is constructed from massive, unmortared fieldstones, piled one upon another with a masterfully balanced, ancient precision. Run your gloved hand along the wall, the stones are cool, slick with a microscopic film of pure condensation, and incredibly textured, covered in deep crevices, rounded swells, and rough sandy plains that have never seen the light of day. This stone ceiling arches gently overhead, forming a low, protective dome that feels incredibly solid, an unyielding earthly shield that completely protects you from the infinite, freezing void of the night sky above. Built against these damp stone walls are long, sturdy tiers of rough-sawn pine shelves, completely filled with the quiet, orderly treasures of the past harvest. Let us step closer to the heavy wooden shelves and observe the beautiful micro-details of these preserved provisions. Arranged in long, meticulous rows sit dozens of large, round earthen crocks, their glazed surfaces shimmering faintly in the stray moonbeam. These vessels are filled with salted meats, thick crocks of yellow butter, and preserved cabbage, their heavy lids sealed perfectly with bands of darkened beeswax. Beside the crocks, resting in deep slatted wooden bins lined with dry, golden straw, are hundreds of late-harvest potatoes and heavy, misshapen turnips. These root vegetables are still heavily dusted with the dark, crumbly soil in which they grew, their skin thick, leathery, and deeply wrinkled, yet their flesh remains incredibly firm, crisp, and alive, their natural vitality completely locked away in a state of deep subterranean slumber. The scent drifting from these bins is beautifully raw and honest, carrying the primal, life-giving essence of the spring fields directly into the heart of the winter night. Further along the shelf, resting in a wide, shallow basket, woven from split willow branches, is a magnificent mound of winter pears. These fruits are a beautiful, muted shade of rusty bronze and dusty gold, their skin completely dry and slightly rough to the touch. Lean in close, closing your eyes, and slowly inhale the incredibly delicate perfume rising from the basket. It is a soft, deeply soothing sweetness, a concentrated essence of pure summer sunlight and warm August rain that has been miraculously trapped, preserved, and carried forward through the dark corridors of time. Sitting quietly beside the pears is a large, clear glass jar filled to the brim with dark, viscous clover honey. The moonlight passes completely through the jar, illuminating the golden liquid from within and casting a warm, amber-colored pool of light across the rough pine shelf. Deep within the sticky depths of the honey, suspended forever in a state of amber perfection, is a tiny, delicate fragment of a honeycomb, its geometric cells a silent reminder of the rhythmic buzzing labor of the summer bees. Standing here in the quiet, deeply insulated safety of the stone-root cellar, surrounded by the sweet, grounding scents of earth and preserved fruit, a profound wave of absolute peace washes over your mind. Down on the frozen river, the harvesters are still resting, preparing for a day of heavy, exhausting labor. But here the harvest is already entirely complete. Everything that is truly necessary for survival has been gathered, meticulously prepared, and safely laid to rest beneath the protective blanket of the earth. There is absolutely no need to worry, no scarcity to fear, and no frantic effort to maintain. The world outside can freeze, the winds can blow, and the seasons can turn. But within this quiet stone sanctuary, life is perfectly, unshakably safe. Let your heavy shoulders drop completely. Let the deep rhythmic silence of the stone walls fill your mind. You are entirely warm, entirely secure, and beautifully cared for in the dark. Close your eyes, let your breath slow to match the ancient, unchanging pulse of the subterranean earth, and simply let yourself sink into the deep, sweet, and restorative slumber of the safekeeping vault. Slowly, with a lingering sense of gratitude for the earth-scented sanctuary of the stone vault, we turn our steps toward the brief staircase of rough-hewn shale. You press your hand against the thick, split-oak door, pushing it outward with a gentle, steady force. The heavy iron latch releases its secure hold with a final muted click, and the door swings open to reveal the boundless, starlit wilderness once more. Stepping back across the stone threshold, the crisp, sub-zero air of the Midnight Valley rushes forward, a cool and pristine cloth that instantly cleanses the rich, sweet perfume of honey and clay from your senses. The transition is remarkably gentle. The dense, humid warmth of the subterranean vault remains temporarily woven into the thick wool of your coat, acting as an invisible shield against the deep frost. As the heavy door gently pulls shut behind us, embedding itself back into the dark hillside, we begin our final, slow ascent toward the absolute highest point of the elevated ridge. The snow beneath your boots is still deep and dry, but here, near the absolute crest of the hill, the wind has swept the powder into a smooth, unyielding crust that supports your weight with a reassuring solidity. Each step feels light, effortless, and deeply peaceful, as if you are leaving the physical weight of the earth behind with every upward stride. Reaching the flat, rocky summit of the ridge, the entire Hudson River Valley reveals itself in a single, sweeping and breathtaking panorama of silver and shadow. Standing here high above the sleeping world, you are perched on the very roof of the winter night. The sky above is no longer a distant ceiling, but a vast, all-encompassing dome of the deepest indigo, so clear and sharp that the stars seem to burn like brilliant diamond needles just beyond your reach. The great river below stretches out across the valley floor like a monumental ribbon of solid platinum, its polished surface catching the full, heavy gaze of the moon and reflecting it back to the heavens with a quiet, majestic intensity. From this elevated perspective, the immense geometric grid of the ice harvest looks like a delicate lattice of fine silver thread woven across a dark mirror, its sharp lines softened by the atmospheric distance into a peaceful, static pattern. The open water channel, which seemed so formidable when we stood at its precipice, is now merely a thin, dark line of pure obsidian, a quiet vein tracing the natural curve of the waterway. The entire landscape is held in a state of flawless, monumental equilibrium, a world meticulously balanced between the freezing earth and the burning stars. Looking closely along the eastern shoreline, the great timber icehouse looks like a benevolent, slumbering mammoth resting at the water's edge. Its long, straight roofline is capped with a thick white cushion of snow that gleams brightly in the moonlight, while its massive pine walls blend seamlessly into the deep shadows of the bank. Short distance away, the tiny, solitary spark of the night watchman's lantern appears as a warm amber dust mote drifting imperceptibly slow along the edge of the dark canal. From this height, his endless rhythmic waltz with the creeping slush is rendered completely silent, stripped of all human effort, and transformed into a beautiful cosmic dance of light and cold. Further up the slope, the large boarding house sits wrapped in its own thick blanket of white, the dark grey smoke from its stone chimney now nothing more than a faint, lazy whisper fading into the star-strewn sky. The entire theatre of human labour has been completely harmonised with the vast, natural stillness of the night. There is no separation between the resting men, the slumbering draught horses, the frozen river, and the ancient stone walls of the forge. Everything has been gathered into the same immense sanctuary of restorative sleep, all living things breathing together in a slow, synchronized and oceanic cadence that fills the entire valley from rim to rim. As you stand on this silent peak, completely enveloped in the vast silver clarity of the midnight hour, a profound and final sense of letting go washes over your entire being. The world below is perfectly ordered, perfectly safe, and beautifully sustained without a single thought or effort from you. The harvest is prepared, the tools are resting, the provisions are secured, and the long winter night is patiently performing its sacred duty of preservation and rest. There is absolutely nothing left for you to track, to analyze, or to accomplish. You have climbed to the highest ridge of history, and from here, the only path remaining is a gentle, weightless descent into the warm, boundless ocean of deep sleep. Lean back conceptually against the unyielding strength of the mountain behind you, letting your heavy shoulders completely drop, letting your hands relax inside your mittens, and letting your chin sink into the soft warmth of your collar. The vast, starry sky slowly revolves above your head, a hypnotic, glittering carousel that gently lulls your consciousness toward the threshold of dreams. The valley below is softly fading into a beautiful silver mist, and your mind is drifting right along with it, floating effortlessly away on a quiet current of absolute, eternal, and completely unbroken peace. Let us begin our final, effortless descent from the high, silvered crest of the ridge, drifting slowly and peacefully back toward the heart of the quiet valley. We do not walk with heavy steps, instead we seem to float down the gentle slope, our movements becoming as light, as weightless, and as silent as the crystalline diamond dust that continues to lazily dance through the indigo air. The vast panorama of the frozen Hudson River remains spread out below us, but the details are now beginning to softly blur, melting into a single, beautiful and deeply soothing vision of pure silver and velvety shadow. The sharp geometric lines of the harvest grid are slowly softening, their hard edges dissolving beneath the patient, steady accumulation of the midnight frost. The dark ribbon of the open water channel grows fainter and fainter, its deep obsidian surface turning into a distant, hazy memory of quiet flowing water. Everything is winding down, slowing its pulse and gently preparing to surrender to the ultimate unbroken stillness of the deep night. You can feel the heavy, comforting blanket of exhaustion wrapping tightly around your mind, a soft and fuzzy weight that gently coaxes your eyelids to droop, inviting you to completely let go of the waking world. As we move closer to the level plain of the riverbank, the air becomes incredibly still, thick with the scent of frozen pine and the clean, scentless essence of raw frost. Look closely at the surface of the untouched snow beside the path. The rime ice is slowly, patiently rising, growing outward from every twig, every stone, and every blade of dormant grass in beautiful microscopic fans of white crystal. These tiny frost feathers are perfectly still, expanding in slow motion under the heavy platinum gaze of the moon. They do not rush. They have all the time in the world, moving with a patient, natural cadence that perfectly mirrors the slow, rhythmic drawing in of your own breath. Inhale deeply, feeling the cool, purifying air fill your chest, and then let out a long, slow, and heavy sigh. With every exhalation, a thick plume of silver steam ripples out into the dark, swirling lazily before completely blending into the infinite starry sky. The world is putting itself to sleep, systematically locking away every texture, every color, and every sound beneath a protective shield of shimmering white, creating a safe, completely untroubled sanctuary for your mind to rest. The silence here is so profound, so heavy and absolute. It sounds like a soft, continuous hum, the quiet, vibrating song of the great river, shifting comfortably beneath its thick armor of sapphire ice. It is a deeply grounding, comforting resonance that vibrates through the earth and settles directly into your bones, melting away the very last stubborn remnants of tension. The great timber icehouse stands completely dark in the distance, its windowless walls packed with tons of sawdust, holding its cold harvest in a state of perfect, permanent safety. The horses are fast asleep in their warm, hay-scented stalls. The blacksmith's forge has settled into a dim, crimson slumber, and the men are buried deep beneath their heavy patchwork quilts, their collective breathing rising and falling like the gentle tide of a sleeping ocean. There is no more labor to perform, no more hours to track, and no more movement to watch. There is only the frost, the stars, the heavy moon, and the deep, inescapable peace of a world entirely at rest. Let your mind drift away from the shoreline, letting your thoughts release their grip on the narrative, allowing yourself to become a quiet, unthinking part of this frozen history. We are drifting out onto the flat ice now, standing perfectly still in the center of the Silver Valley. The diamond dust falls all around us, millions of tiny weightless stars gently settling upon your heavy coat, upon your shoulders, and upon the soft wool of your cap. Each microscopic flake is a tiny anchor of peace, gently pinning your consciousness to the quiet earth, pulling you deeper and deeper down into a state of heavy, dreamless lethargy. The light of the moon is soft, a pale and comforting luminescence that washes over your closed eyes, painting the darkness behind your lids with a beautiful, soothing shade of deep slate grey. Your breathing is slow, perfectly regular, and effortlessly deep, aligning itself with the massive, lethargic heartbeat of the winter night. You are perfectly warm, perfectly secure, and entirely protected within this beautiful dream of the past. The world has stopped its frantic spinning, leaving only this single, eternal moment of crystalline calm. Let yourself sink down, down, down into the soft, supportive mattress of the undisturbed snow, letting go of the last stray thoughts, and simply allowing yourself to fade peacefully into the dark. The river is still, the ice is solid, deep and heavy, locking the vast valley in an eternal sapphire embrace. Step by slow step, the world recedes into a boundless silver fog, leaving nothing but the pure rhythmic rise and fall of your own breathing. Sleep is pulling you down now, down into the soft, weightless powder that blankets the earth from shore to shore. The diamond dust drifts lazily from the indigo sky, each tiny crystal a weightless touch of peace, settling over your mind, smoothing away the final, lingering shadows of the waking day. Rest your thoughts entirely upon the frozen surface of the deep water, letting them sink beneath the clear, dark layers of ice where the quiet current moves in a slow, oceanic slumber. The great wooden icehouse rests in absolute darkness, its pine walls breathing the scent of old sawdust and silent preservation. The tools are asleep, the heavy steel saws are coated in smooth oil, and the iron tongs hang motionless from their wooden pegs, completely released from the burdens of human labor. There is nothing left to watch, nothing left to hear, and nothing left to do. The night is perfectly safe, perfectly still, and infinitely long. Let the slow, heavy heartbeat of the valley become your own. Inhale the crisp, pure frost. Exhale the heavy silver steam. With each slow breath, your body grows heavier, sinking deeper and deeper into the comforting, protective mattress of the winter night. The horses sleep in their warm straw. The blacksmith's forge has cooled to a soft, dim maroon, and the men are lost within the deep, heavy folds of their patchwork quilts. The valley has surrendered entirely to the frost, wrapping itself in a magnificent, glittering shroud of white that dampens every sound and completely stops the movement of time. The shadow on the stone sundial remains perfectly still beneath the platinum moon, counting absolutely nothing, leaving you safely suspended in this single, beautiful moment of unbroken peace. You are entirely warm, entirely secure, and beautifully cared for in the quiet dark. The silver light behind your closed eyelids is softening, turning from a gentle grey into a deep, velvety and impenetrable blackness. Let the world fade completely away. Let the river carry your wandering mind into the deep, untroubled depths of a healing, dreamless sleep. Rest now. Lean into the heavy, dark drift, away into the endless, silent winter night. Sleep. Welcome to Sleepy History with Wesley, your personal sanctuary of ancient tales. Here, we blend authentic historical events with gentle AI technology to recreate immersive, soothing journeys through time. This channel is crafted specifically for relaxation and sleep support. TAND is not a substitute for professional medical advice. For your safety, please do not listen while driving or operating machinery. Now, close your eyes and let history carry you into a peaceful sleep.